One of the most interesting parts of Pokemon Legends Arceus was how it gave us a glimpse into the past of the Pokemon world, including some new or old variants of Pokemon that in modern times have either adapted into something completely different or are endangered, rare enough to the point of being practically extinct. And those are the Pokemon we're taking a look at today. When Game Freak sat down and designed these Hisuian forms of already existing Pokemon, what was it that inspired them? What animals, what cultural tidbits, and what legends are they based on? Well, looking at the time and place PLA takes us to, we get our first clues. We know that Hisui is Sinnoh before its name changed, and Sinnoh is based on Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost large island. And while no exact dates are given, it seems to take place in the mid to late 1800s. A lot of folks are surprised to hear that though, thinking it was much more ancient, but the thing to remember is, you're probably thinking about the Western world's 1800s, with trains, telegrams, steam power, the startings of electricity in cities, factories and machines made of brick and steel. Meanwhile, at the same time, Japan still had samurai and entire cities built with nothing but wood and rocks. The Industrial Revolution had not yet spread to Japan. But this time period is what Japan calls the Meiji Restoration. It was a major turning point in Japanese history. After centuries of isolationism, they were opening up and modernizing, restructuring their entire government, industries, and means of trade. One unfortunate aspect of this was getting into good old colonization. An empirical Japan spread into and completely reformed Ezo, even renaming it to Hokkaido after their explorers and troops did their stuff to the natives, the Ainu, and mapped out and documented all of the valuable resources and animals the island had available on it. That is pretty similar, if not identical, to what's going on in the game. A group from the south is going out and exploring Hisui, mapping it out, documenting what Pokemon live there, and building cities. And when all is said and done, Hisui gets renamed to Sinnoh. Literally, it's this. Plus, if you look at their technology level, yeah. So, when Game Freak started designing new Pokemon forms for this region, they took the local natives' beliefs into account. While they have their distinctions, obviously, one can draw similar lines between the beliefs of the Ainu and of various Native Americans. They practice a form of animism, the belief that the gods and or spirits, or kamui in their case, are all within nature, within each and every animal, and within each of us. And as we'll soon see, some of the most well-known and respected kamui are the ones that Game Freak made sure to make reference to in these new Pokemon designs. So, let's start with my favorite one. After I call you out. I see you there, half paying attention while you watch this in bed. Extra long videos like this do attract a lot of passive viewers, and yes, I appreciate you too. But do your aching bones and muscles appreciate you? How's your bed? This video's sponsor is certainly an upgrade to it. Mattresses and mattress toppers from Helix Sleep would make for an excellent gift to yourself or those you love this holiday season. After my wife and I got the Midnight Lux almost 9 years ago as our first real mattress, oh man, the difference was night and day, pun not intended. The cooling cover! I wasn't waking up sweaty every morning anymore, and I wasn't tossing and turning nonstop. Much better sleep. Helix has 20 premium mattresses to choose from, each built for different sorts of sleepers. Let their quick and easy questionnaire match you and a partner to the best ones for your sleep styles. And if that's not enough to build your confidence in them, maybe this will be a 120-night sleep trial to make sure you love it, and they come with a lifetime guarantee. Proof that they are confident you'll love it, and I am too, for whatever that's worth to you. Especially right now, thanks to their Cyber Monday extended sale, giving you 27% off of everything they offer, which includes their mattress toppers. Maybe your current mattress just needs a little boost. This here is their premium mattress topper with Glaciotex, so it feels cool to the touch. Perfect for hot sleeping action. Plan ahead for the holidays. Head to helixsleep.com/Lockstin, link in the description to check them out to improve your sleep quality and maybe your YouTube watching quality too. Now then, I love bears. How can they be so dangerous when they have ears like these? Bears are definitely my favorite wild animal, other than maybe crocodiles.
And also Zasha, my vicious and oh so wild apex predator.
There are exceptions to my love of bears, though. Sloth bears? Kinda gross. Pandas? Well, Oh, they're cute, but they're so stupid. Sun bears. They just kind of ruin bears for me. Cave bears? Let's just say I'm glad they're extinct. Moon bears, aka Asian black bears. More like stays in the back bears, back of my favorite animals list. That's not true, I love you. I just couldn't resist. Polar bears? I mean, they're okay, but they're no Pizzly, or Grizzly, or American black bear. I really like bears. Ursaring is part sun/moon bear and part grizzly. Sun and moon bears are both very closely related and are often confused for one another. I mean, they both have these partial rings on their chests and are found in Asia, so I don't blame people for the confusion. But if you're ever confused about which is which, simply ask yourself, does he look like a bear that is ugly? Then it's a sun bear. I do love their super puffy shoulder neck fluffs that they've got going on. Very fitting of Ursaring's shoulders things. And also Ursaluna's shoulders? But these bears are black bears, and these bear Pokemon are definitely brown. So there's definitely some bear mixing going on, like with the Pizzly, a polar bear grizzly. They're so cute and so sad. They're mixing more and more because Earth's warmer temperatures means that grizzlies can expand north. Meanwhile, polar bears are losing all of their ice, so they have no choice but to move south where there's solid land. Yay! But mixing in a brown bear like the grizzly makes perfect thematic sense. After all, Teddiursa is a brown teddy bear, and brown teddy bears are the iconic plush toy. They are a symbol of toys as a whole, even. And their story is pretty simple. Stuffed animals, bears included, had been a thing for a while, but it was in 1902 that they finally took off. Then US President Theodore Roosevelt was on a big game hunting trip with many other hunters, and while they found plenty of animals, Theodore had not located a single bear, which made him a bit sad. One of his assistants, though, did find one, cornered it, tied it up, and then invited Theodore to shoot it. But that's unsportsmanlike, so he didn't. News of this event was later published in a paper. Later, a political cartoonist satirized the event, and when a Morris Mictum saw that cartoon, he and his wife, who made stuffed animals, made a stuffed bear dedicated to him, and called it Teddy's Bear. It grew popular enough that mass production began, and, the rest is history. Little kids sleeping with their stuffed teddy bears soon became commonplace, and we see it in media all the time, from Peter Pan to Winnie the Pooh. And this association with sleeping, both because kids sleep with teddy bears, and because bears sleep all winter, as well as just the existence of moon bears, as well as the Ursa Major and Ursa Minor constellations in the night sky, is why the whole Teddiursa line not only has a whole moon motif going on, but they also all have Ursa in their names. So what is an Ursa? Well, it's just Latin for bear. Simple as that. But more people these days associate it with the constellations, more so than bears as a whole. But what's with those constellations? They look like cookware. Why are they also bears? Well, the Big and Little Dippers, as they are also known, are just parts of the bigger bear constellations. You're looking at the bear's butt, specifically, you weirdo. Here's the whole thing. You can probably see the bear now. See? Yeah. It's so obviously a bear that various civilizations all over the world came to the same conclusion. The Greco-Roman story is about Jupiter's wife turning Jupiter's mistress into a bear, later discovering she had a son, and then doing the same to him. So Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. The Lakota and Algonquin each use their word for bear for that set of stars. The Wasco Wisram say the constellation is 5 wolves and 2 bears left in the sky by Coyote, the trickster. In old northern Europe, it was believed the Great Bear lowered a younger bear to the earth, and when it was killed, its spirit rose to become Ursa Minor. This is also one of only 3 star groups mentioned in the Bible. Job 9:9 describes it as the Great Bear. My favorite interpretation, though, has to be from the Iroquois. My biggest issue with this constellation is that bears don't have tails that long. So, in the Iroquois story, those 3 stars are not the bear's tail, but rather 3 hunters in the distance chasing after the bear. And the Burmese think it's a crab. But what of the Japanese? Pokemon is a Japanese game after all, and, well, there isn't so much a bear connection, but there is still a very interesting connection. In Shinto, this constellation specifically belongs to Ame-no-mi Akan Nushi. Ame-no-mi Nushi. It's the oldest and most powerful kami, one of the components of Arceus, in fact. So very fitting then that Ursaluna was introduced in this game. But here's a follow-up question. Why is it the new Stoutland? In Pokemon Sun and Moon, we were introduced to ride Pokemon, and Stoutland was the one that we rode around on for it to sniff and dig. Makes sense, because it's a dog. Detective dogs and drug-sniffing dogs and hunting dogs are all trained to do exactly that. Depending on the breed, a dog's sense of smell is between 10,000 and 100,000 times better than we humans. A group that includes me. Yes, I, like you, have around 6 million olfactory receptors. The part of the nose that lets you smell. A bloodhound, the dog with the best nose, has 300 million, and in a wider variety of kinds, too. And the part of their brain that deals with smells is 40 times bigger than ours. But get this. Black bears smell 7 times better than a bloodhound. Most other species of bear still smell 5 times better than a bloodhound. And really, a bear's main scent is its smell. Polar bears follow their nose for 40 miles. Yeah, they smell food 40 miles away. Granted, there isn't much in the Arctic to block smells, but even in forests, your typical bear can smell food 20 miles away. The saying, follow your nose, comes to mind. One whiff, and they know all of their directions. They use their nose like a star map that the Ursa constellations have been focused on for thousands of years. Ursaluna gives you directions the same way the Ursa constellations do. Here is the navigational method humans in the Northern Hemisphere have used since before written history. First, find Ursa Major. It's pretty easy because the 7 brightest stars in this constellation are super bright compared to most in the night sky, and they also form a very distinct shape. Then, with the shape of the bear's butt, aka the Big Dipper, you can take these 2 stars and have them point you right to Polaris. Or you could recognize this shape and then start looking for Ursa Minor, or the Little Dipper, which is the same shape, though not as bright. But then, upon finding that, you follow Ursa Minor's tail and bam! The end is Polaris itself. So what's Polaris? Well, it's known as the North Star. It's been used to tell direction and time for eons. And isn't direction just where you are or are looking in space? Time and space? Dear God, it all comes together. And there are many other constellations around these ones that have lines that line up pretty well with the Ursas too, all helping orientate you, as seen here. This constellation is such a big part of northern life that Alaska has Ursa Major on their state flag. But again, just its butt. The weirdos. The official state of furries, I guess. New question. So Teddy Ursa has a crescent moon, Ursa Ring has a hollow ring, perhaps representing a new moon, and Ursaluna then has a filled out circle, so a full moon. That's not a question. But did you notice that Ursaluna's strange eyebrows resemble clouds in front of the moon? There we go, that's a question. Small clouds just kind of covering the lower part of the moon is a very common way of depicting it. But why can't it move its eyebrows? Oh, because it's peat! Just like the stuff on its back and all over it. And that also explains its odd evolution method. I mean, you give Ursaring a peat block while in the Crimson Mirelands. When it's a full moon, egad, that's a lot of steps. But it begs a few questions, like, what is peat? Why is peat? Bear? So what is peat? Well, it's an accumulation of partially decayed vegetation or organic matter unique to natural areas called peatlands, bogs, mires, moors, and more. It's kind of like clay or mud, except organic, hence the ground type. And if you notice this world map of peatlands, you'll see that Japan doesn't really have many, except in Hokkaido, which is Sinnoh, which is Hisui. According to the Pokédex, Hisui's swampy terrain gave Ursaluna its burly physique and newfound capacity to manipulate peat at will. And that likely has to do with bears being burrowers. Bears rarely use the same den twice, so each year they have to dig a whole new one. They particularly like digging under trees, so the root cover becomes their ceiling. And you'll notice that a lot of ground-type Pokemon are based on animals that do this. Moles, shrews, snakes, rabbits, cicadas, and in fact, the Ezo brown bear is particularly famed for digging big holes in the sides of hills, and Ezo sounds familiar. Why is that? Oh, right, it's what Hokkaido used to be called before they renamed it during the Meiji period, which is the same era that inspired Pokemon Legends Arceus, which similarly sees Sinnoh named Hisui instead. How could I forget that? The Ezo brown bear is one of the largest bears, period, and are famous on the Shiritoko Peninsula in eastern Hokkaido. Females with cubs often spend their time near people, and often will just approach fishermen, and in over half of a century of this, no accidents or casualties have been reported. This particular connection with Hokkaido's people may be another reason why Ursaluna plays a vital role in helping the trainer do the things that it do. It being an Ainu Kamui may also play a role though. The Ainu are those indigenous to Hokkaido, remember, and Kamui can be translated as god or spirit or both. In this case, we're talking about Kim-un Kamui, the god of the mountains and bears. So here, Ursaluna has a mountain of peat on its back, and it's a bear. The connection with the Ainu may also be referenced with Ursaluna's cloud eyebrows. Compared to the Japanese of Honshu, Ainu men are said to be hairier and have bushier eyebrows. Even Ibisu, a Shinto god that is sometimes said to be Ainu, is typically depicted with larger, rounder eyebrows, and Ainu women would traditionally get tattoos for various reasons, sometimes to distinguish ethnic groups, sometimes to show that they were married, but the most characteristic of these are of course their mouth tattoos, but tattooing the backs of their hands or their eyebrows was also common. Oh hey, that young Ainu woman has an Ezo bear cub. What's up with that? Well, a big part of their worship of the bear mountain god was the Iomante ceremony. If a hunter finds a hibernating bear and she has a newborn cub with her, they will kill the mother and bring the cub back to the village to raise it as one of their own. Some say they would even give the cub human breast milk. They would continually feed it high quality food, sometimes even the best cuts of meat the village has, and when it turns 2, they tie it to a post and shoot it with several arrows to sacrifice it. The village partakes in its meat and blood, and they place its skull on the end of a spear or post and wrap it up in its fur. It is now an object of worship, and the bear has been sent off to the world of the gods or spirits, where it will tell them of all of the good deeds and hospitality that the village showed them. The practice was made illegal in 1955, in part due to the bear's dwindling population, and even today the species is considered vulnerable, but in 2007 they were given religious exemption of the animal rights laws, though these days the ceremony no longer involves killing the animal. But raising a bear as a family member from cubhood is sort of what little kids do to teddy bears, right? Sleeping with it, feeding it at tea parties and playtime. Raising a Teddy Ursa into an Ursa Ring or Ursaluna is sort of the Pokemon world's equivalent. Whether that exact connection was intended or not though, what is true is that Ezo bears are extremely important in Ainu culture, so obviously it had to be there for the new bear Pokemon in Hisui. Making it an Ursa Ring Evo to sort of finish that line off too just makes perfect sense, you know? Put it on all fours so it's a natural ride Pokemon to utilize the bear's sense of smell and connection with giving directions with constellations and stars. Make it evolve at a specific time and place to reference time and space. Make it covered in peat because Ezo bears burrow a lot, and also peat blocks are also extremely important to the Ainu. Plus, bears taking mud baths isn't uncommon, and like most animals who do it, it's to remove parasites and help regulate body temperature and moisture levels. So a blanket of muddy peat draped over Ursaluna's shoulders works really well. You could even see it sort of as like the top of a puffy fur coat. So all in all, it's a line of bears, who would have thought? But I do love how they incorporated the bear's cultural status as a very important thing in the sky. Very neat. But not nearly as cool as what they did with Avalugg in this game. Everybody loves Avalugg! Do they? Do they really though? I guess it is the bad and the ugly, so everyone else looks good. Avalugg is one of those Pokemon that like just kinda exist for some reason or another. Hisuian Avalugg is new, so that's nice. But Avalugg was originally introduced in Generation 6, so Kalos, so France. It's possibly a reference to wine? Baguettes? Large towers that compromise for things? Alright, well, the land is older than France, so let's look at pre-French history then. How did the most recent Ice Age affect Beta France? Not much. France does have a few gorges formed by glaciers, like the Verdun Gorge, which was formed during the beginning of the Pleistocene period, what many refer to as the Ice Age, so from 2.5 million to 10,000 years ago. But taking a look at Europe through most of that period, the bulk of the Ice Age was much, much more northern. But look! What would eventually become France and England were still conjoined by land. They were buddies before nations existed. But thankfully, despite all of this ice being much more Norse, Kalos actually has plenty of Northern European stuff in it too. It's not all frilly lame snail-sniffing compensation, Baguette. The legendaries are based on Norse mythology, after all. And there's Aurorus, and, Avalugg. So, as the Ice Age ends, glaciers break. Huge chunks of ice fall into the ocean and become icebergs, which then float out to sea far, far away. And that right there, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's a Bergmite! Look at this cutie! It's small compared to Avalugg, hence it being a little mite. And since they sometimes live in ice caves, they are all among the stalagmites. Both definitions of mite, and that's why it's so tiny and pointed. Plus, if it wasn't obvious, it is just a reference to the saying, that's just the tip of the iceberg, which is referring to something that is very clearly apparent, but under the surface runs much, much deeper. There's a lot more obscureness lurking under the surface. And that's Avalugg! Avalugg is an iceberg, the underside specifically, hence it being so big. I mean, have you seen most icebergs? Many icebergs really are flat on the top. It's why penguins and seals like to sit on them, and why Bergmite likes to sit on top of Avalugg riding it around. One Dex entry reads, "It doesn't seem to mind if other Pokemon hitch a ride on top of it to cross the water." It's like a crocodile in a way. A flat who hides its true size under the surface. And also doesn't mind giving rides to certain other animals. It's even got that diamond shape. Them carrying other Pokemon around is where it gets the lug part of its name from. It lugs them around and lugs heavy objects. And here's just a perfect etymology fact. The word lug is Scandinavian in origin. How cool is that? It's ice cold cool, that's how cool it is. As a Scandinavian noun, lug refers to an ear, or rather, the part of a hat that flaps over the ear, not unlike these ice crystals on Avalugg, or those ice crystals and mandibles on Hisuian Avalugg. Don't worry, we'll get to that. The Ava then is just from avalanche, which is a large cascade of ice, snow, and rock, as well as whatever they pick up along the way. Like a ski lodge. In a way then, when an iceberg breaks off of a glacier, is that not a mini avalanche? Back to crocodiles though. Some ancient ancestors of theirs that once lived in what today is Europe are the Adasauruses and the Stagnolepis. Stagnolepis? Stagnolepis. Stag? Oh no! Lipis! Both of which are Adasaurs. They were similarly flat-backed and low to the ground, and looking at Hisuian Avalugg next to a person, they were about the same size too. Though that is easy to say when the smallest Adasaurs were only a meter and the largest were 3, and the Avaluggs are 1.4 and 2 typically. Other than all that and their very triangular heads, another one of the better connections that they have has to do with their back plates. Avalugg has these horizontal cracks along its back ice armor, which allows it to bend despite the armor. Similarly, Adasaurs had horizontal rectangular rows of large interlocking bony plates that overlapped a bit with a small opening that allowed them to still move despite being completely covered in back plating, which made them flat on the top. Both these beasts are defensive and spiky along the edges too. So you combine all of that, and you get Bergmite and Avalugg. But then, out of seemingly nowhere, Pokemon Legends Arceus gave us Hisuian Avalugg. What is this European ice-aged dinosaur croc with a Scandinavian hat doing in Hisui? Well, it's pretty cool, honestly. Once again, cool because it's ice. And now it's rockin' out. Hisuian Avalugg adds the rock type to its previous mono ice, which could be simple. Sure, avalanches take rocks with them, or maybe it's more directly a glacier now, carving canyons into the earth, ripping up the edges of mountains and carrying their rocks along with it. That explanation is satisfactory enough for why it's rock type, sure, but I have so many other questions. Why is it smaller than regular Avalugg? Why is it more narrow and less diamond-shaped? Why is it here in a historic Japanese region? And why does it have these weird, like, tusk mandibles? Is it just a Nunatic? Or none-attack? Oh, don't you worry. I didn't know what it was either. So you have a glacier, or a big ice sheet, and then a big rocky mountain sticking right up out of it. Sometimes it's a plateau. That's a Nunatic. Do you see the resemblance? Big vertical rocky body, but a snowy or icy top? Heck yeah! They also tend to be kind of pointy and sharp-edged because of the glaciers and ice scraping at their sides all the time, wearing them down over the millions of years. But now, let's get back to answering those other questions. Let us first look at glaciers in Hokkaido. There are none. Alright, but how about during the last ice age? Hokkaido did have its share of glaciers. The canyons and rough edges in the Hidaka Mountains were formed by them. Though, according to developments of quaternary sciences, quote, mountain glaciers in Japan were less extensive during the last glacial maximum. This is out of phase with the continental ice sheets in the northern hemisphere. In other words, during the last ice age, Hokkaido had glaciers, but they were abnormally small compared to the rest of the northern hemisphere. Perhaps pointing to Hisuian Avalugg being so much smaller. And narrower too. I mean, think about it. Glaciers compared to icebergs tend to be much longer than they are wide, just by their very nature being part of the formation of canyons and rivers after all. However, that might also have to do with boats, specifically the very flat-topped aircraft carrier. I've said this before in our Every Ice-type Pokemon Explained video when talking about regular Avalugg, and if being similar to an aircraft carrier wasn't intended back then, perhaps it is now. Particularly the aircraft carriers made in Project Habakkuk by the Allies in World War II. I mean, look, they're even the same shape. In short, due to materials like steel being harder to get and becoming more and more valuable due to the war effort, the Allies wanted to find a more efficient means of transporting their warplanes by sea. Aircraft carriers use a load of stuff to make, and when they sunk, all that stuff's just lost. So the goal of Project Habakkuk was to build one out of a combination of ice and wood pulp in a ratio of 6:1, a combination called pykrete. I mean, think about it. Icebergs float and are flat, and they just sit there. They're free. You can just take them. The police can't stop you. You can put planes on them the same way Bergmites sit on Avalugg. And consider Hisuian Avalugg's Pokedex entry. The armor of ice covering its lower jaw puts steel to shame and can shatter rocks with ease. Yeah, pykrete also puts steel to shame. It's not quite as strong, but it's healable and takes only 1% of the energy needed to produce the same mass of steel. That is so much more efficient. But ultimately, while prototypes were made, these ships never saw active use.
It's because they would just melt, isn't it?
Well, yes, but actually no. Ironically, it was because they were too expensive and used too much material. Just of a different kind, cork instead of steel. But also, when large enough, ice takes forever to melt. Take an ice cube. It melts after so long. Now take 2 ice cubes. They help keep each other cold, so the melting takes longer. Now take 1 billion ice cubes and insulate them from the outside warmth with cork. An oversimplification? Absolutely. But still, that's why after it snows, even after most of the snow melts away, after a few days or so, the mound of snow that piles up from the snowplow plowing the snow, that could last weeks. But speaking of snowplows, is that the deal with Hisuian Avalugg's flip-flaps? It looks like it. Especially the plows in front of trains that gotta go through the snow and shoot it out all over the place. Pokedex! This Pokemon barrels along steep mountain paths, cleaving through the deep snow. Conveniently, wedge plow trains are often used throughout Hokkaido. I mean, they've got trains that go through where there's snow half of the year. Take a look at the Kia 291. That plow also opens up. I wonder... Consider how Hisuian Avalugg opens its jaw covers and then starts shooting giant hunks of ice at you out of its top. Not unlike how these trains can open up to reveal a snow sucker, or snow blower as some like to call them. That's a lot of blow. Oh, look at that. The JNR DD14 loves snow. A lot of these plows are also just put in front of the trains as needed, rather than being built into the front car, which makes it look a bit separated and a bit triangular. Sort of like Avalugg's head, no? How it's like there's a neck, so it's not the same as its body? And the biggest connection this all has to Hokkaido is not only that it snows a lot there, so they need to frequently use snowplows on their railways and roads, but also Hokkaido has a lot of snow, and they depend on snowplows to live. Have you seen Frappe Snowland in Mario Kart 64? You'd think this area is just silly Mario magic, cartoony fun, but it's actually not even as crazy as reality. This is the reality in Hokkaido. Every year, 15 meters of snow! Scenes like this are so uniquely Hokkaido and so intrinsic to their way of life there that, of course, it had to be referenced somehow. And here it is. An Avalugg. And heck, if you think about it, what is a glacier doing if not plowing through mountains? They even bring nutrients from up in the mountains down to the valleys. Glaciers are great for plants. Is it a coincidence then that Yama no Kami, a Shinto kami, is the goddess of mountains and agriculture? Especially since you use plows in farming too? So, I'd say that about sums it up. It's a Nunatak glacier with some Japanese snowplow or snowplow train elements sprinkled in. Maybe original Avalugg was just an iceberg Atosaur monster, and Game Freak saw the connection people were making to Project Habakkuk and then said, heh, no. But that's a pretty good idea, let's write it down. And so they made it a regional variant. Or maybe, just maybe, that particular connection is just a coincidence. After all, Avalugg is not as obviously aircraft carrier as, say, the Dragapult line. And also, Project Habakkuk was pretty, the opposite of Japanese. You know? Well, now let's talk about something dark, yet white at the same time. A lot of folks asked why I didn't have a video about the new video of the ruined Hisuian footage and all that, and my answer was basically, because everybody all over Twitter is right. Like, it's gonna be a Zorua based on that classic Japanese kitsune mask. I mean, why would they specify the time in that video if not to literally mention Zorua's Pokedex number? And Zoroark's, you know? But anyway, I'm so smart, and now it's time for me to tell you Hisuian Zoroark's origins. So, base Zorua and Zoroark are known as the Tricky Fox Pokemon and Illusion Fox Pokemon, and for good reason. Zoroark's whole gimmick is that it uses illusionary magic to make itself appear as different Pokemon, and judging by the spooky ghost form we see in the video, that ability likely remains, though it may be modified to be more shadowy and ghostly this time around. This idea comes from its origins. It's a Japanese folklore fox creature known as the Kitsune. It's the same thing Ninetales is based on, but each pull from different aspects of it. Zoroark specifically pulls from its shape-shifting abilities, and possibly also its personality trait of being a trickster. Meanwhile, the whole Ninetales thing is that Kitsune are said to grow more and more tails based on either their age, wisdom, or power level, depending on who you ask. And you'll notice that Zoroark's hair is designed to somewhat resemble a foxtail since its butt is tailless, and this new Hisuian Zoroark has ghostly wisps and even almost separated peaks within its main hair tail thing, resembling the multiple tails. And it looks like both forms of each evolution have these face markings reminiscent of kabuki or Knoll theater makeup, which was very popular in feudal and Edo period Japan, which is also when these kitsune masks exploded in popularity as novelties for attendees to wear during various festivals, especially harvest festivals, because foxes are messengers of the god Inari, who I'm going to look up how to pronounce. Inari. Wow. Inari is the protector of rice and agriculture, so it didn't take long for the mask to cement itself in Japanese culture sometime in the 14th century. You know how much of their society is based around rice? There were actually all sorts of masks with all sorts of different meanings, though, by the way. Mask wearing during ceremonies was a big part of Japanese culture even before it was Japan, since at least the Yomon period, 10,000 BC. But the white fox mask with red stripes was among the most popular. After all, in Shinto belief, white is the color of the gods, and red is the color said to protect from evil spirits. Hence, why most Shinto priests would dress in white and red. All the bad spirits gotta go away because they see them and they get spooked. Woo! Maybe cut that. It's also exactly why all of the good spirits in Okami look the way they do. Speaking of Okami, here's Inari Okami, the goddess of foxes, prosperity, rice, tea, and sake. And gosh is she popular, nearly 30,000 shrines across the whole of Japan. Almost more than every other god. And in many depictions, she, of course, has this iconic mask. Also worth mentioning, in kabuki theater, red stripes on the face are used to symbolize justice, or a hero upholding justice, protecting those it can, which fits great. In the footage, Zoroark attacks the person recording because it is protecting the Zorua. We know that that is what it's doing because the Japanese version of the Pokemon Legends website has like a conversation between professors, and that's what they say they're doing. So yeah, it's justice, protecting. Pretty straightforward. And plus, it turns out these Zorua were reborn in this ghost-type form through the power of their malice towards human and Pokemon. They were driven from other lands by humans who shunned the Pokemon for manifesting uncanny illusions. Which isn't unlike real foxes. Predators across the globe face this issue. They eat some farmer's chickens, and so the farmer gets mad and drives them out, sometimes to extinction, and then the whole ecosystem is ruined. And this does give them a motivation for revenge, which is fitting because vengeance is a common theme in many kitsune stories, hence why even Ninetales has a Pokédex entry that says, "Very smart and very vengeful." Grabbing one of its many tails could result in a 1,000-year curse. But back to Zoroark, the illusions that baneful fox Pokemon projects have expressions of such utter malice towards every last thing upon this world that those who see them are said to be driven mad by the terror. Being malicious also fits right in with kitsune lore. There are two main types of kitsune, Zenko and Yakko, and the latter fits here perfectly, described as the more malicious of the two, and also they usually appear as black or white, and can even be invisible, like a ghost, whereas the other kind tends to be more yellow or golden, like Ninetales. And similarly, Yakko, when they attack humans, harm them inside and out, causing not only scratches and burns, but also grave and or mental illnesses. And smallpox! Wonderful! And that's notable because that's a part of Hisuian Zoroark's official description. The golden yellow eyes are an important aspect of it too. It is said that when a person is possessed by a kitsune, they have golden eyes. It's a telltale sign. Or if someone is born as a human-kitsune mix, because sometimes they did that, they would always have naturally golden eyes. The ghost normal typing here is easy. It's pulling more from the fox spirit aspect of the kitsune, which is also why its fur is so long and wispy, like spirit tails. But it's still a fox. It's just a fox. It's a fox body. It just happens to have ghost abilities, but the body itself is just a normal body. So it's normal ghost. It's the same reason why, for instance, Pyroar is normal fire. It's got a normal lion body, but it just happens to breathe fire. Whereas most mono fire types have fire on their bodies, or their bodies themselves are embodiments of the fire element. There's like fire magic flowing through their veins. Not Pyroar, it's got regular magic flowing through its veins. And it can breathe fire. Also, the Kitsune, it really was just a normal fox. The Japanese word for fox, like just a normal, regular, everyday fox, is Kitsune. All normal foxes were seen as these spirits, so they are all normal ghosts. Or what if its normal type is just an illusion? And then suddenly, out of seemingly nowhere, a Voltorb! Hisuian edition. Hisuian Voltorb is just so dang cute, honestly. I mean, it's still just a Pokeball, so it's based on an object, so it's unoriginal, TM. Game Freak's running out of ideas. Actually, I haven't heard that argument quite as much lately, but then again, I'm also becoming more and more of a recluse. Just like Voltorb, apparently. In the old times of Hisui, the guys were super cute and super happy. Overly so. But according to the Legends Arceus website, in human settlements, Hisuian Voltorb is considered a nuisance. Tales of people temporarily plugging the hole on Voltorb's head and kicking it out of settlements are not entirely uncommon. So I guess after enough of this happening over the decades, the Voltorbs adapted and became angry little balls. But how? And why? And hang the heck sec on grass type? Grass electric type? And also, do you remember the classical days of Pokemon theorization on YouTube? Here's an old video from my first year on YouTube.
And now, essentially, this is a living Pokeball. And those Haunter eyes look quite a lot like Voltorbs.
Alright, enough of that voice. In summary, the Haunter line love possessing objects and playing pranks. If one possesses a Pokeball, though, it may become trapped because it's a Pokeball. That's what they're designed to do. And so, the Pokeball gets Haunter eyes. And it also fills with gas and grows in size dramatically because Haunter is stinking huge. And thus, it becomes a Voltorb. The same theory also works with a Rotom to an extent. Voltorb's Pokedex does mention that they were first discovered in Pokeball factories, which this theory would explain, but now, that's probably debunked. I suppose a Haunter could still possess a Hisuian Pokeball, and perhaps that Pokedex entry is only referring to modern Voltorb, but also, perhaps not. Maybe a Haunter in Hisuian times possessed a Hisuian Pokeball at the Hisuian Pokeball factory. And then it also became a seed? It doesn't work as well. But yeah, a seed ball. The official site says there seem to be countless seeds packed inside Hisuian Voltorb. So what's up with that? Well, it may have to do with the way Pokeballs were made in the past, as in with apricorns. It's what you get when you cross an apricot with an acorn. They were only found in two places, the Isle of Armor and Johto, and both of these places do seem to love their old traditional ways. And in Johto, there's this old dude, Kurt, who makes Pokeballs for you in the old-fashioned way, with apricorns, which are organic and grow on trees. It does make me wonder if these Hisuian balls are a clearer, more developed version of these apricot balls, After all, it was Gen 4 that we visited both Sinnoh and Johto. So say an apricorn Pokeball gets made. Would it then, being possessed by a Haunter, turn it into a Hisuian Voltorb? Well, perhaps that is one theory, but since it has an organic structure now and existed before its manufacturing process, that opens up to many more possibilities. Just think about the number of insects that make their homes in fruits and nuts. From your classic caterpillar in an apple, to avocado wasps.
Ava what now?
Yeah, avocado wasps. There are some vegans who say eating avocados isn't vegan because of avocado wasps. They have a symbiotic relationship with avocados. They lay their eggs all up inside of them so their babies have food to eat, and the avocado tree gets another pollinator. Guaspamole, anyone? Jokes aside, learning this news is actually extremely upsetting to me. I stinking love avocados. Some say too much, but they are like a perfect miracle fruit. But aside from the avocado wasp, there are countless beetles that do this for their larva babies. The fig eater beetle is even named after this fact. And the Papelia japonica, aka the Japanese beetle, famously loves doing that to stone fruit and plums, peaches, apricots. Apricots, apricorn. We getting somewhere? So here's the scene it starts to lay out for us. In the Pokemon world, hatching is almost just kind of like evolving. There's a bright light, and then the thing can like hextuple in size because infinity energy magic, you know? Supposedly, infinity energy is also how Pokeballs work, turning physical Pokemon into energy to then store in the ball. So if, say, a bug-type Pokemon, or heck, even whatever bugs the move Infestation are, lay their eggs in an apricorn, have I been pronouncing it wrong this whole time? The bugs lay their eggs in an apricorn, and then that particular apricorn gets made into a Pokeball, will you get the same deal as the Haunter possession thing? The egg's life essence or infinity energy is now trapped inside the Pokeball as it was being made, and the energies fuse together, creating a Voltorb? Perhaps the little bug in question is a Joltik. Or, considering the apricot-loving Japanese beetle again, it's a Vikavolt, or other related bond, which would explain Voltorb's electric type. It could just be a Grubbin or Charjabug trapped inside of it. Consider the eyes. Unlike regular Voltorb, those are eye holes, letting whatever is inside of it see and breathe. Perhaps the seeds it drops out of its little hole is actually a Grubbin dropping, which is made of apricorn seeds because it ate the apricorn, so... Or maybe that's a dumb idea. Would explain the electric type, though. But the grass typeness could simply just be because of the wood graininess from the apricorn, which, being an acorn or apricot, would have seed parts. So there's a seed inside of the Voltorb. I mean, seeds are just tree eggs, but speaking of, Execute is a tree egg. They aren't eggs at all. They are seeds. You can tell because of the exposed endosperm, which is this part of a seed, and also the fact that they evolve into a tree. A tropical tree, by the way. Remember the Sharpedo and Garchomp are related thing? We have a whole video about that over here, but in short, look at them. It's honestly evidence enough. But also, Sinnoh is a very harsh and cold region. Sharpedo was introduced in Hoenn, a very warm subtropical region. Waters are too cold in Sinnoh for Sharpedo, so in order to better expand its territory north, perhaps it adapted to come on land, like a land shark, like the land shark Pokemon, like the Gibble line. We could apply this same logic to Execute. It's way too cold and harsh to sprout a tropical tree in Sinnoh or Hisui. Heck, it's too hard to survive even. So in order to move north, they needed to adapt. Only the Execute with protective shells around their seeds could survive. I guess they all kind of have protective shells. The ones that have really, really thick protective shells, perhaps wood-like. Plus, I mean, just like the old Haunter theory, Execute also has Voltorb eyes. And at least one of Executor's heads is happy all the stinking time, just like Hisuian Voltorb. Perhaps the electric then comes from potato batteries are a thing. While in minuscule amounts, plants do create electricity, but another theory. In our video about Pokeball Pokemon, we went over how Pokemon that resemble Pokeballs are essentially JRPG mimics. I mean, on the overworld map, you pick up items that are the same shape as Pokeballs, but some of them happen to be Voltorbs. It's just like chest mimics. Biologically speaking, a mimic would want to spread its genes just like any other plant or creature, and being taken along a trainer's journey is a great way to do that. So it becomes advantageous to look like something a Pokemon trainer would want to interact with. Enter Fungus, the mushroom Pokeball mimic. You know how mushrooms reproduce? Microscopic spores that happen to land on mushroom food. You know what mushrooms love to eat? Decaying plant matter, fruit included. But it doesn't have to already be in the state of decay for the spores to grab a hold of the material. And quite often, fruits will begin to decay or ferment while still on the branch. So say a spore lands on an apricorn. Repeat the process we already explained, but for the Amoonguss spore, life, infinity, energy, mumbo jumbo, and then poof! The Pokeball now has a Pokemon soul, like, infused with it. It's just a fungus parasite thing. Kinda just like Paris and Parasect, except it's a Pokeball. Also, then the seeds it makes would just be apricorn seeds, I suppose, because it's just an apricorn Pokeball that is alive thanks to shrooms. Or since the Pokemon world is crazy enough, maybe the actual Pokeball manufacturing process isn't actually involved and Voltorb is completely natural. It could be that the apricorn tree itself is a Pokemon and we just don't know it yet. I mean, people can't tell a Sudowoodo in the middle of a pathway from a regular tree. People are pretty dumb in this world when it comes to trees. The tree has to have spawn of its own, in this case, Hisuian Voltorbs. which go out and spread more apricorn tree seeds around the world by rolling around. And this would make Voltorb just like any other fruit Pokemon that already exists. Maybe this supposed apricorn tree Pokemon is the executor equivalent to Voltorb is an execute thing. Maybe it's not that Voltorbs look like Pokeballs, it's that Pokeballs were designed to look like Voltorbs because Voltorbs are a modified apricorn from the apricorn tree Pokemon, so they just happen to look the same. Or maybe this idea is also dumb. Seed Bomb. Every Hisuian Pokemon has been a very traditional Japanese thing so far. Seed Bomb is a move in Pokemon, yes, but it's also a thing. Nendo Dango, or seed balls, are a collection of native seeds that are then mixed with compost or even humus, and then put into a ball of liquefied paper and clay. Kartana is just paper, and it's grass type. Also, paper is just wood, like the Voltorb's base here. So you would make a load of these seed balls and then begin the process of seed bombing, which is when you just scatter these things stinking everywhere. It's a practice that was actually done since the times of ancient Egypt, but it eventually fell out of fashion in later centuries until Japan later revived it in a whole new way. But why would you do this? Why not just sow your seeds like a normal person? Well, because sometimes the environment is too harsh for your seeds to be as efficient as you'd like. The seeds, then, need a head start in their sprouting, or they need protection. Especially from the wind and the cold. Remember the execute thing I mentioned earlier? Executes needing protection? Sinnoh, or Hisui, just like the Hokkaido it's based on, is a very cold and very windy region, so the added protection is great. But also, there's a thing called guerrilla seed bombing. It was a TikTok trend not too long ago, but it's been a thing for centuries. You would make these seed bombs with native flower species seeds, and then drop them somewhere that you don't own. Like not your land, like perhaps a public space, or your neighbor's ugly yard. Thanks to the seed bomb, they are more likely to survive and actually grow, as well as spread out, making wherever you planted the bomb a lot prettier. And better for the bees. And remember, Voltorb, Hisuian or otherwise, is all about exploding like a bomb. And now it has seeds inside of it. Remember, the official description, there seem to be countless seeds packed inside Hisuian Voltorb. Occasionally, it spouts these seeds out of the hole in its head. Countless seeds! You don't just put a single seed in a seed bomb, you put several. That's how it's a bomb. And these seeds periodically come out of the hole on the top of its head, kind of like those cat treat dispenser toys. It just drops treats or seeds uncontrollably as it's rolling around. So there's just spontaneous growth of flowers, seemingly out of nowhere, in seemingly random places. Maybe the Hisuian people finally realized that it was Voltorb's fault that all of these annoying plants were popping up, and that's why the official description states that they plug its hole up and kick it out of their settlements. Not everybody agrees with the practice of seed bombing. Some even call it vandalism. Flowers are too pretty for my sour personality, and the environment isn't ruined enough yet. And now there's Hisuian Electrode. It's pissed! Rather than original Voltorb and Electrode going from grumpy to happy, we went from happy to furious! When irritated, this Pokemon lets loose an electric current equal to 20 lightning bolts. Oh, so it's an Electrode again, but wooden. Not really adding anything new, huh? They're balls, and they explode. But that's not unlike the classic Japanese firework balls, which vary dramatically in size, just like these Pokemon. Unlike your typical cylindrical fireworks, these Japanese fireworks are spherical, and made mostly out of paper, a wood-based material that you layer on top of additional layers of paper with the firework explosives lined throughout it. It's like a papier-mâché balloon, except when it pops... Yeah. Oh, those may definitely be playing a role in these Pokemon designs. It makes me want to spin! Oh. Smacking the mic. Smacking my brain. Okay, that's dangerous. Not doing that. Alright. One actual session of dry heaving later, and we're back. Oh my god. Alright, let's cut to the chase. This is anti-Breloom propaganda. They want you to forget about your boy Breloom and fawn over this waifu plant instead. Don't you fall for it! So in short, Hisuian Lilligant is a ballet dancer. You can see it in her pose, shoes, outfit, signature move called Victory Dance, and the name, Lilligant, an elegant lily. Unnovan Lilligant is just another kind of elegant, resembling Western high-class women's fashion from the 1700s, especially ball gowns. After all, it learns pedal dance upon evolving, meaning that pedal dance is a big part of its design. So yes, it's an elegant dancer, a ballroom dancer. And then, according to many Pokedex entries, this Pokemon has a lot to do with aromatherapy. The fragrance of the garland on its head has a relaxing effect. Sniffing the aroma calms your heart and mind. Essential oils made from Lilligant flowers have a sublime scent, but they're also staggeringly expensive. And even Hisuian Lilligant, the scent it exudes from its flower crown heartens those in proximity. It's an easy connection to make, really. Flowers and herbs smell good, and are often the primary ingredients used in the making of essential oils. Now, a lot of people wince with the term essential oils whenever it's brought up because of, well, let's just say a rabid fan base with a lot of overlap with the anti-science, vax, goodness folks. You know? They don't realize that you can get all of the benefits of a vaccine with none of the autism if you just rub a little holy basil oil on the injection spot. It brings the power of God to your base ill. It's in the name. But keeping to reality, aromatherapy is a legitimate use of essential oils, and it's pretty straightforward. You put good, holistic smells in the air of the room, and now it smells nice. Nice smells are relaxing, and in turn can reduce headaches and be calming. How pleasant. Like, it's that simple. You ever smell bacon in the morning and get hungry? That's more than enough proof that smell affects mood. It can even be used to treat anxiety, dry mouth, low appetite, nausea, and more. I could really use some right now after all that spinning. What it does not cure, despite what plenty of folks will tell you, is depression, cancer, or decapitation, or whatever else they're claiming these days. You're also being sold what is practically, or literally at times, snake oil. The part of the Pokedex that says Lilligant's essential oils are staggeringly expensive? Yeah, all these recent health claims are just so they can charge more for a drop of herb diluted in a whole vial of water. Not even, a drop of herb diluted in a whole barrel of water that then makes over 1,000 vials. These oils aren't regulated. They can put anything they want in there and just slap a label on it because, you know, freedom good. And it's not like you're avoiding big pharma by using these oils instead of medication. Most of the big oil brands are owned by the same companies. Well, you know, companies that are owned by companies that are owned by companies. You know, illusion of choice and all that. There's only 2 brands of glasses. There's only like 2 brands of most medication. They're preying on your feelings. I thought you were supposed to be all facts over feelings. Anyway, the legitimate use of essential oils has been a thing for over a millennia. Ancient China, India, and Egypt did it a bunch. And essential oil distilling was done in Persia since at least the 10th century. Plenty historical and cultural significance for a Pokemon, you know? So, what sort of essential oil does one get from a Lilligant? Well, the most well-known for its calming effect is lavender, but Lilligant and Petalil do not resemble lavender in the slightest. Rather, its leaves seem to resemble the leaves of various mints. Spearmint, peppermint, especially Petalil. And, fun fact, Kitami, the city in Hokkaido that Celestic Town is based on, at one point produced 70% of the world's mint. They are incredibly mint farmers. So there's another reason why Lilligant is in Hisui. All the mint. But we can't forget about Allium victorialis. Those leaves are like 1-to-1. And with the common name Victory Onion, well, that's just another connection to Hisuian Lilligant's signature Victory Dance move, now isn't it? And until relatively recently, it was believed to have been a lily in the lily family. Perfect for Lilligant. It's not actually, though, anymore, because we know better now. sad. But the Cardiocrinum cordatum is in the lily family, and lives in Hokkaido, and sure enough, they are incredibly important to the Ainu, as the bulbs can be harvested and used to make a kind of traditional dumpling, and along with the flowers and leaves, they would create folk medicines, which is not unlike homeopathy. Unova Lilligant's flower seems to resemble an orange flower, and I'm not just saying that because it's orange, but I mean like the fruit orange. Look at a mandarin orange flower, or a pomelo flower. These are both also used in calming essential oils. The only flower that really resembles Lilligant's better is the orange Asiatic lily, which is also a lily, Lilligant, it's in the name. It's just not used for calming essential oils nearly as much, if at all. However, I've talked about the language of flowers a few times on this channel. In short, it's a way to communicate a message through the symbolism of flowers or bouquets. Asiatic lilies are symbols of beauty, marriage, and purity in Western cultures. Lilligant is wearing a large, elegant gown after all, and is seemingly pure and innocent. When orange, specifically, they are symbols of warmth, confidence, and passion, vibrant satisfaction in life. When pink, though, like on Hisuian Lilligant, they symbolize healing, love, admiration, and femininity. I suppose that's fitting of a ballet dancer. Ballet is widely seen as a very beautiful, pristine, feminine dance. And many would very well call it elegant and high class, very fitting of Lilligant. But there is one stark difference between ballroom dancing and ballet. And that's how hardcore it is. Ballet dancers need intense core strength and body coordination, unrivaled balance, and ripped up legs, figuratively due to the power of their muscles, and literally because ballerina legs and feet are used to the point of intense bruising and ripped skin. People who say ballet is some frilly woman's dance have no idea about the pain and the intense training it takes to be perfect. It's not at all unlike the kind of training martial arts users go through. Disciplined, rigorous, strength and motion enhancing training. It's no wonder Hisuian Lilligant adds fighting type to its previous mono grass. She's a bad grass fighter now. Legs so strong and motion so well trained, there's no need to differentiate her kick attacks from a martial artist's. Plus, just think about how many video games have a fighting character just use dance moves, you know? Heck, Pokemon already does that with Hitmontop being a capoeira dancer. Granted, that's a dance that's also a martial art. But still, question though, so what is a ballet dancing plant doing in Hisui in Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is based on Hokkaido, roughly during the Meiji Restoration? Good question. Japan is no stranger to ballet, but it's not like they are known for it. However, super summarized history lesson time, the reason Japan finally decided to colonize and forcefully integrate Hokkaido into itself is because Russia was starting to do the same thing. It's why you'll find a few Russian Orthodox cathedrals in Hokkaido, and why you'll find many of the islands surrounding Hokkaido being claimed by both Japan and Russia. And heck, Sakhalin, the long island that Sinnoh's battle frontier is on, is a part of Russia. It's easy to think of Russia as European, but no, they spread all the way east. And more south. The reason this is worth bringing up, though, is because for a time, Russia was the world leader in ballet. Around the year 1500, ballet found its beginnings in Italy. A century later, France did that thing it always does with everything and said, nah, it's French now, and it continued spreading throughout Europe, different areas developing different signature styles. And then, quote, by 1850, Russia had become a leading creative center of the dance world, and as ballet continued to evolve, certain new looks and theatrical illusions caught on and became quite fashionable. Dancing on point became popular during the early part of the 19th century, with women often performing in white, bell-like skirts that ended at the calf. Point dancing was reserved for women only, and this exclusive taste for female dancers and characters inspired a certain type of recognizable, romantic heroine. a sylph-like fairy whose pristine goodness and purity inevitably triumphs over evil and injustice. In fact, Swan Lake and the Nutcracker, the two most famous ballets ever, were by this Russian guy that I don't even want to try to pronounce the name of. Pyotr Ilyich Chives? Peter Liechchivsky. Peter likes chives, see? So if there was ever going to be a Japanese ballet Pokemon, it makes the most sense to have it in Hisui, because Hokkaido had plenty of Russian influence, and also the peak of the Russian ballet craze was at the exact same time as the Meiji Restoration, late 1800s to very early 1900s. History is so neat. But perhaps there is more to her design. Notably, ballet dancers typically don't have these upward pointed shoes, especially on the back. So could ice skating play a role here? Oh yeah, definitely. That's Ice Skating Jump Move 101. Hokkaido is the winter wonderland of Japan after all, featuring many winter sports centers, even hosting the Winter Olympics and many ice skating competitions. And also, professional figure skating is just ballet on ice. It's fancy, elegant, performative, seen as more feminine, takes intense training, and you do plenty of pirouettes in both. That's like the main link between ballet and figure skating. And Hisuian using Leaf Blade takes on a whole new meaning when she does so with her feet, like she does. And also, when and where did figure skating first become competitive? Also the late 1800s. The first figure skating world championship? 1896. St. Petersburg, Russian Empire. Also, just look at historic ice skates. The first were pointed just like Lilligant's feet, and in the 1800s they got fancy ends. And in both ballet and figure skating, you typically wear little high skirts with the legs either bare or in tights for the better range of motion. Plus, with all of these Russian Empire connections, could you say that Lilligant's and Petalittle's head resembles a kokoshnik? Typical elegant headwear? No? Just me? Well, either way, all in all, Hisuian Lilligant is a ballet figure skating mint lily that smells good. And that's pretty cool. Pretty bad grass. But that's a given since we're talking about ballet dancers, right?
One more thing!
As mentioned in other videos, Kleavor is based on one of Nobunaga's generals. Sneasler is partially based on Nobunaga's wife. Samurott on Nobunaga. And I think, emphasis on think, that maybe Hisuian Lilligant is partially inspired by Nobunaga's sister, Oichi, who is actually a very major character in Pokemon Conquest 2, which, remember, is a Pokemon crossover with Nobunaga's Ambition, the tactical version of Koei's other game, Samurai Warriors, which these Pokemon potentially pull their designs from. The pop culture modernized depictions of these historical figures as seen in Samurai Warriors, rather than the real people in, like, their real portraits or whatever. But Oichi, Nobunaga's sister, is classically against her brother's evil ways. Valiant, pure, and innocent are words to describe her in basically every depiction she's ever gotten. And famously, she marries Azai Nagamasa, which is an important note because, again, of those things that the flower symbolizes, remember. On top of this, her moveset primarily involves spinning and kicks, and she wears pink and has a flowery headdress tilted to the side, and a ballet outfit. The heck? What? The fuck is that? You're right, Rayquaza. The heck is this? Like, Kleavor looks strange enough of a Pokemon on its own, but as a Scyther evolution. Scyther's strange enough on its own, too. It's a praying mantis with scythes for hands. Okay, that's cool. That makes perfect sense. But then it has a lizard head and, like, lizard feet? What? But okay, let's try and figure out what's going on in Kleavor's design. Like, first of all, why is it just this dude? Like, the hair and the twin axes? And we'll get to that later, I guess. First, let's go into the most obvious thing. The name. It's Kleavor, with a K and an O later on. A cleaver being those really big butcher knives that are used for cutting through whole fish or big bones. And thanks to this ability, sometimes they go by another name, a bone axe. Hence Kleavor's hands resembling axes a bit more than a classical kitchen cleaver. But now, both being a Hisuian evolution, meaning that this is in the distant past, and this being a bug rock evolution of Scyther, it points to another cleaver, this one. A tool we've used since the late Stone Age. It's just a rock that's broken in just the right way as to make a rudimentary axe-like head that you would hold on to itself. It was good for cutting into wood, or chopping through fish. Kleavor's official description on the Pokemon website states, parts of its body have hardened into stone. The stone parts often get chipped during fierce battles, and Kleavor that have survived many battles will display larger chipping across their bodies. However, the chipping actually makes these stone parts sharper, increasing their slicing power. It is said that the people of Hisui once used pieces of stone that had fallen from Kleavor to craft tools. Very fitting. These rudimentary stone tools would obviously break all the time because, like, it's a stone, Luigi. And obviously, they'd get dull very quickly compared to metal tools. But that could be fixed just by breaking off a new flake of it. Good as new. It's just smaller. So you can only do it to a point. And it's worth mentioning that the real-world Hisuian people equivalent, the Ainu, are, quote, one of the longest-running traditions in the world. And when it comes to adopting the technology and culture of outsiders, quote, resistance endured the longest on the northernmost island of Hokkaido, where the Ainu maintained a hunting-gathering culture well into the 19th century. So, even though this game seems to be taking place in a time period inspired by Hokkaido in the late 1800s, there would for sure still be a presence of stone tools. And interestingly, even outside of Hokkaido, the Stone Age lasted a bit longer in Japan when compared to the rest of the world, likely just due to the rarity of metal ores on the island. Metallurgy didn't really become common-ish in Japan until the Yayoi period, as people with agriculture and metalworking technology began immigrating over from the Korean peninsula, and their culture and people mixed with and then eventually took over the native hunter-gatherers who were already there. But enough about that. Who the heck is this guy, and why does he look so similar? Well, this is Shibata Katsui. This character model specifically from Samurai Warriors, where he wields two oversized axes, and he has the same haircut as Kleavor too. And this outfit of his even has the fur shoulder piece that Kleavor seems to reference, but we'll get to that later. So, this dude is based on the real-world Shibata Katsui, who appears in other games too. Here's a demon-y version of him from Nioh 2, where he is also wielding two oversized axes, and is similarly big and mean. Here he is in Fate Grand Order. Not with axes, but still with furry shoulders, and, again, big and mean. But who even was this dude? Well, he was a samurai during the Sengoku period. But not just any samurai, no, he was one of Oda Nobunaga's generals, putting him among some of the most famous samurai in history. He also became known as Devil Shibata, for some rather ruthless military tactics. So again, big and mean. And before you ask, no, he wasn't in Pokemon Conquest. IRL, he murders his wife, Oichi, who is like your main assistant friend in Pokemon Conquest, so they probably didn't want to allude to that being a thing that happens later. But anyway, while it is uncommon, it's not unheard of for samurai to wield axes, and if a warrior is a makeshift warrior, say from a nomadic or barbarian people, then using the tools you have around you, like a woodcutter's axe, may be your only option. And I of course bring that up because of Kleavor's shoulders looking like the edges of a fur coat, though it's made of rock. But look, its wings even resemble tufts of fur now. Being a Hisuian evolution specifically does help its case for having this furry connection, as one name the Japanese had for the northern people, the Ainu, roughly translates into shrimp barbarians. And when you think barbarian in modern media, what do you think of? Usually some ripped warrior wearing mostly fur clothing. Be you Eastern or Western, this is a common trope. The uncivilized Northerners wear fur because it's cold up north, but also wearing mostly fur is so uncivilized. So clearly they are barbarians. And what do barbarians use as weapons more commonly than their southern neighbors? Axes. Think about the Vikings, for instance, as well as any northern nomadic people. They would mostly have tools, such as hunting and wood-cutting implements to use in defensive warfare. And heck, with Kleavor, it's mentioned that its axes are for wood-cutting. It's just also able to use them as weapons. But all in all, though, the idea of an axe-wielding, fur-wearing, big and tough barbarian of the north caught on, and persists to this day. Even in modern Japanese fashion, wearing fur accents on your clothing is seen either as a cute way to keep warm, a way to show that you are rich and noble, or as a means of making you look big and tough, like you killed the animal. Hence its use in the Yakuza games. Now, perhaps looking like this dude specifically is a bit of a coincidence, and if that is the case, then that's just because they both have a variant of the same common samurai hairstyle, the chonmage, or samurai ponytail. Keeping your hair like this helped hold those big samurai helmets in place, and eventually it became the haircut of warriors, so it caught on in fashion to those who, again, want to look big and mean, look tough. And then it became a man bun. But no matter how stylish these buns may or may not be, they cannot even hope to compare to the hair of a Sneasler. The number of times I typed Hisuian Sneel in this script was hilarious. Sneel! Hisuian Sneel! Hisuian Sneasel is kind of a thing. I'm not sure if I like it, but I know I definitely prefer regular Sneasel to it, that's for sure. But question time.
What the frick? Is that a funky cat?
Actually no. Sneasel isn't a cat, it's a weasel. It's based on the Shh.
I know more than you. All right.
Sneasel and Weavile get different parts of their names from weasel. That is true in English. But if you look at its Japanese name, Niula, it's got nya, Japanese for meow, the sound a cat makes. Weavile too, Manula. And back to Sneasel, it could also pull from Nora, meaning stray cat. And I mean, think of its personality too. It's a mischievous little feral cat, dark type, prowling in alleyways, stealing food and mittens. Feral cats missing a part of or their entire ear is also an extremely common thing. Sneasel only has one ear, the other one is a feather, acting almost like a prosthetic. Feral cats get in a lot of fights, and their claws can easily tear the flesh of each other's ears, because their ears are thin. But also, ear tipping is a common practice. Non-killing humane societies will sometimes catch stray cats, vaccinate them, spay or neuter them, and clip off the tip of one of their ears to signify that they are spayed or neutered, and vaccinated. And then they let them go. And thus, feral stray cats with a partially missing ear is a pretty common thing. And now suddenly, the Pokemon Company's Gararu Nyasunohi merch line in Japan, featuring all cat Pokemon doing their day-to-day things, having a Sneasel as one of the cat Pokemon in it, makes perfect sense. Sneasel is a feral cat. And yeah, I am leading you astray. It's not like this is an either-or situation. Every Pokemon has multiple things brought into its design. The first example that pops into my head is Dragapult. It's a stinking salamander Diplocalus crossbow aircraft catapult stealth bomber that holds itself up and cares for its young like a crocodile, and it's a ghost. Sneasel can be a weasel and a cat, guys. I mean, the weasel is in the Mustelidae family, the same as ferrets, ermines, and polecats. And a lot of people use those names pretty interchangeably. Plus, its Japanese name may have nya in it, but it also has yu, meaning weasel. It's an alternate reading of Itachi, which brings us to the Kamaitachi. A weasel yokai with long, sickle-like claws, and also like Weavile, they are fast as the wind, and fly past you in a swirl, leaving you with mysterious cuts you have no explanation for, while also stealing your things. Folklorists say this was an explanation for wind cuts, which is when the freezing wind dries out and splits your skin open, hence their ice type. Weasels are also known for being, well, weaselly, cunning and deceitful, sneaky, hence the dark type. And another weaselly trait, Hisuian Sneasel and Sneasler's patchy fur here. That's weaselly. Weasels, polecats, and ermines in colder regions have seasonal fur colors, meaning in winter their fur is white, while in summer their fur is brown. It's all for camouflage. And this of course means there has to be a transitional period, right? Being brown and patchy white, or white and patchy brown. Yeah, hence the strange patchy fur patterns on the Hisuian Pokemon. So, okay, it's part weasel and part cat, but neither of those animals have feathers, so what's with the feathers? And are they even feathers? Well, if you look at the Viveritae family, they are feliform, and look like if a cat and a weasel were kinda merged. They have partially retractable claws, and are often mistaken for wildcats too. And the Civitictus, or African civet, has this dorsal crest that is kind of feathered. I don't know, that's what Bulbapedia says. It doesn't do it for me. But at least with Weavile, they point to Egyptian headdresses, which I can see. They were often stylized to resemble wings and feathers, and would often have a jewel in the middle, like on Weavile. Plus, pharaohs and other royals were known to be buried alongside their cats, and their cats would have collars and jewelry adorning them. Again, perhaps a bit like Weavile. Weavile's eyeshadow also kind of resembles Egyptian eyeshadow. Perhaps the Eye of Horus, they say. Horus does have a falcon for a head, and falcons are not only wicked fast, but also have feathers, and would often, eat weasels. If we're going to connect Weavile to the Egyptians, we have to look at Weavile through its cat half, and not its weasel half. There is no reason for Weavile and Sneasel to have pharaoh elements if it's strictly a weasel. But if Sneasel and Weavile are even just a little tiny bit cat, it makes perfect sense. The Egyptians worshipped cats. It is a common misconception, as is them being guardians of the underworld, which, honestly, that misconception could explain Weavile's dark type. I mean, the other guardian of the underworld Pokemon, Houndoom, is also dark type. But this misconception is so prevalent it even found its way into many blockbuster hits like The Mummy starring Brendan Fraser, The Hottie with a Body. I mean, look, the Mummy himself freaks out when he sees a cat because he fears that the cat will drag him back to the underworld. They don't do that. They're cats, and the Egyptians didn't think that they did that. We just thought that's what the Egyptians thought. It was a big misconception. But this isn't the first time a Pokemon has something about its design influenced by a common misconception, so it's fine. In actuality, the underworld wasn't guarded by cats, but rather by 2 lions, but actually it wasn't 2 lions, it was one god, Aker, I'm probably mispronouncing that, and this one god was depicted as a chunk of land and 2 lions. The god was all 3 at once. Egypt was weird. And as for cats being worshipped, it wasn't so much worship as much as they were just a part of their everyday life, and they treated cats with respect because they had a sort of divine energy about them. The royals did particularly like them though. Even back during Egypt's first dynasty, they were loved specifically because they protected the pharaoh from venomous snakes and scorpions. Cats were not all literal gods themselves though, and thus were not inherently worshipped the way we worship cats today. Isn't that right, Zaja? You want some treats? So yeah, I can see the Egyptian elements with Weavile, but considering it's a Gen 4 Pokemon while Sneasel is Gen 2, I do question if that was the original idea with Sneasel or not. But what else is there? Like, a single feather on the head and maybe a couple below? It does get a whole head of wide feathers like this. Well, the first thing that comes to mind are Native American headdresses or war bonnets, especially those worn by chiefs and those in power. The exacts differed between nations, but when somebody did an honorable deed, they would be gifted a single feather for their bonnet. These deeds could be any act that helped their communities prosper, but the most common, in the earlier days especially, were acts of valor in battle. Actually, do you see all these weasel skins right there? Yeah, those were also parts of some of the headdresses. Weasel pelts were often used in First Nation clothing, especially in the Great Plains. In fact, according to Plains anthropologist John C. Ewers, they did not eat the weasel, but the northern tribes snared these animals in winter to obtain their handsome white pelts, and were used by many tribes to decorate war bonnets. Whole weasels were sometimes tied to shields as war medicine, and some Siouan tribes carved representations of the weasel at the ends of their wooden war clubs. Among the Plains Indians, the association of the weasel with warriors' clothing and weapons appears to have been derived from their recognition of the fighting qualities of the weasel. So that's cool, and since the gaining of feathers is done through acts of valor in combat, a weasel, which they saw as good fighters, gaining feathers as it evolves just works. But then Sneasler just kind of doesn't do that. Just one of them's longer. Maybe because instead of a Weavile, it's just more Sneasel? It's Sneasel-er? That might sound dumb, but consider its Japanese name, Onula. Remember Sneasel's name? It's that, but with an O in front of it. O means big. Its name is literally Bigger Sneasel. Sneasel-er. But there is also a bit of a play on words here, mixing Sneasel's name with Onyudo, meaning big monk. It's another yokai like the Kamaitachi, only this one is humanoid, much taller, and can make people who see it become sick. Remember, Sneasler is fighting poison type, and that yokai would explain that, as well as its more human proportions. Plus, while Onyudo are typically shown as big people, some are said to be able to shapeshift into animals, and some even into shadows, which makes it quite fitting as an alternate Sneasel. Also consider this story from the Bird Insect Woodstone biography, Weasel's Mystery, written in the Iwate Prefecture, 1934. A mysterious fire ignited in the main hall every night at Kodenji Temple in Tokuta Village, and a terrifying Onyudo appeared from the shadow. I walked around the temple and found a footprint of a weasel coming out of the main hall. As I followed, I went under the firewood in the wooden hut next door, so I saw a weasel's nest when I looked away from the firewood while being surrounded by many villagers. I caught an old weasel from the nest and killed it. Then, from that night, neither the mysterious fire of the temple nor the Onyudo appeared. So the Onyudo was the weasel then. Huh? Neat. And you know, being a weasel, which are renowned for their fighting ability, and also being a large monk, that would explain the fighting type as well. But other than the whole they can kind of make people sick if they see them bit, what's with the poison type? Well, that has to do with the weapon it now wields. Cat claws, cobra claws, beast claws, falcon claws, and tiger claws. They go by many names in media, and they may at times seem fantastical, especially with how long they are and how often it's associated with poisoning the enemy after washing the blades with poison. But they are based in reality. There's the shorter ninja variety, the poisoned tekokagi, which means back of the hand hooks in Japanese, and the shorter still Indian bagnach, which means tiger claw in Hindi, which was also poisoned and also used for assassinations. Considering the sneaky ways of assassins and of weasels, this connection seems easy, especially considering that this is basically the weapon that X-Men's Wolverine has on him at all times, and Wolverines are the largest member of the weasel family. But of course, they are indeed exaggerated beyond belief in media. Historically, these weapons were never longer than a few inches. After all, these are supposed to be concealed weapons, but making them longer makes them more intimidating, especially given their claw-like structure. It makes the wielder appear as ruthless as a predator. And plus, you could just make a claw weapon out of another iconic blade from India, the Aruval, and bam! You got yourself a super cool fantasy weapon. In fact, in Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and many other fantasy games, and heck, even Samurai Showdown, this style of weapon typically comes with a chance of poisoning the target, all because of that association with real assassins. In fact, we might be able to look at another cat claw-wielding assassin to find another facet of Sneasler's design. You can tell by Sneasler's idle animation in battle that it knows how to use those claws, and just look at that! That is a fighting game stance, but its idle animations and poses outside of battle show a more feminine side to it. Sneasler was already thinner, taller, hot pinker, more eyeliner, and has a longer hair-like feather. But here we can also see its sass with the beauty hair whip thing. I mean, just look at that. Sneasler is the new fur-bait Pokemon. Alaska loves them. And this weapon being associated with being more feminine or flamboyant is a very common enough trope. Think of Vega, the pretty boy from Street Fighter. Think Voldo, who some would say is a BDSM homoerotic zombie from Soul Calibur. Think Zhongha from Dynasty Warriors, there's a pretty boy. Grace and Glory from Bayonetta have these, and one of them's even pink. And then there's Pit. He's a kid, don't talk about that kind of stuff. These cat claw gauntlet fist things being considered a more graceful and feminine weapon may come from its inherent design. They resemble claws. Cat claws at that. You scratch with them. In cat fights, when two women fight each other, there's a lot more scratching involved than when men fight, typically speaking. Comparatively, the female form isn't built for as much upper body strength as the male form, but also, stereotypically speaking, women keep their fingernails longer. It's a beauty thing, which, in a pinch, they can also be used as a weapon. So, scratching, as your main force of attack, is almost inherently feminine by society's standards. And interestingly, both Vega and Zhongha have the long ponytail hair just like Sneasler. Could they be related to why Sneasler has this long feather in the first place? Or is it just because it's more feminine? Could be either, I'd say. Remember the Kleavor video where I talked about how Kleavor resembles Shibata Katsui from Samurai Warriors? The Dynasty Warriors spin-off that similarly bases its characters on real historic people and takes place in the Warring States period of Japan that also features many characters who are also in Pokemon Conquest? Well, if Kleavor pulls from that guy and all of the design tropes associated with him, then why wouldn't Sneasler pull from Zhongha? He wears similar colors after all. But actually, he's just the only dude that uses these weapons. And he's especially effeminate compared to the other raging testosterone demons in this franchise. However, Nohime from Samurai Warriors uses them too, and she's not only a woman, but is especially sexual at that. Not only because of the way she dresses and acts, and cakes on the makeup more than most of the other ladies in the series even, but the way she's coy and acts all innocent, and she's sneaky about her skill. She hides her weapons until the men around her let their guard down as she infatuates them, and then she strikes. And heck, even during gameplay, most of the time when on the battlefield, you can't even tell that she's armed at all. She hides her weapons perfectly. So she not only has the right color, temperament, and weapon, but she's also toxic. Her titles in Samurai Warriors 2, for instance, are Viper's Daughter, Lady of Oda, Sweet Poison, Deadly Beauty, Demoness, Venom Queen, and Serpent Goddess. Both because, again, these claw weapons are based on real claw weapons that were often poisoned, but also because her relationship with her husband is very much a form of toxic love. Oh yeah, her husband, by the way, Oda Nobunaga, just like the real Nohime, Oda Nobunaga's legal wife. And again, if you remember the Kleavor video, Shibata Katsui was one of Nobunaga's top generals. And Nobunaga himself clearly plays a role in the design of Hisuian Samurott, but we'll save that for their video. I do think it's pretty clear though that as far as media depictions go, these fighting weapons are inherently associated with poison and with femininity. And also kind of creepy hemo-erotic behavior too, which I don't want to get into, plus that's only tangentially related, but What I also haven't mentioned yet though is Sneasler's association with rock and ice climbing, and that's because it's pretty straightforward. These weapons are pretty similarly shaped to ice and rock climbing picks, which are used in rock and ice climbing, which is what Sneasler does for you. Interestingly, it was Monster Hunter World's Iceborne DLC that added the Clutch Claw weapon. Coincidence? Maybe, but to go almost full circle here. Again, remember the Onyudo I was talking about many minutes ago? It means big monk. Well, where do monks famously go to train? Yeah, up in the cold, icy mountains, especially the Himalayas. And you know who wields these and other similar weapons not only in the real world, but also most commonly in games and such? most often ninjas and monks. And also whatever the heck Taukaka is. But even with Taukaka, she's catty. She's a sexy cat girl. And sneaky, hiding her face, hiding her weapon, sneaky like a Sneasel. These things all inherently go together. This is all one set of tropes. A Venn diagram, maybe. And it's cool to see things like this reach Pokemon in a interesting way. A Sneasler. Even if it is a little weird. What's this? A video about Qwilfish? It's more likely than you think. Because here it is. What's this? A video about Qwilfish? It's more likely than you think. Because here it is. Wait a second. Look at this. Something seems so odd about it. Is this some kind of regional variant? Oh wait, that jogged my memory. Qwilfish has been a Pokemon since Y2K.
It's just that nobody talks about it.
Because, I mean, look at it. It's just a puffer or blowfish. What more than that is there to say? I mean, it's cute. Look at his little face. Look how it inflates. So then why does no one ever talk about this? Does it just have to do with it being a forgettable fish, like so many other forgettable fish Pokemon? Or could it be because you need a super rod only on a handful of routes, and even then it only has a 5% chance of appearing? So, like, nobody had it, and then even the people who did have it didn't use it because it's not good. Like, its stats are terrible, and its move pool is... Probably both of those things. Well, Game Freak hasn't forgotten about it. Pokemon Legends Arceus has given us a regional variant, Hisuian Qwilfish, and it even evolves. It's like literally the Porcupuffer from Super Mario. What is this Splatoon obstacle doing in my Pokemon game? Well, let's get its etymology out of the way. Qwilfish. It's a fish with quills, which are spines or spikes. And Overqwil, that's just plain overkill. It doesn't need spikes so big they don't even fit in the little Pokedex journal image thingy, but it has them anyway. It's overkill. So what's its deal? What's so special about Sinnoh in the past, so Hisui, that makes this Pokemon make sense? What historic connection is there? And why, oh why, is it poison dark type now? All these questions and more in today's fish-blowing video. I can explain. But first, a fun fact. This isn't even the first time Game Freak considered giving Qwilfish an evolution. All the way back in Gen 2's development, there was a beta Pokemon named Shibirifugu, which loosely translates to numbness pufferfish, and it's a pretty cute dude, right? Well, for some reason they didn't stick with that design, because then later, in the 1997 demo of Gold and Silver, it looked like this, which isn't terrible by pre-release Mon standards, but it's got nothing on the previous design, in my personal opinion. Also, it looks even less like a Qwilfish, or even less like a puffed-up pufferfish at all. Though the lightning bolt on the 97 demo one does sort of imply that it was going to be electric type, though, as we know, when the game actually did come out, Shibirifugu was gone, and Qwilfish ended up being water poison. Maybe the indecision of what its evolution should look like or be is what led to it eventually being scrapped completely. Who knows? But then why add Qwilfish at all? Well, the easy answer is that there are many species of blowfish that live all around the world, Japan included, because it's a part of the world, and many of them are poisonous, hence the poison typing on both forms. In fact, it's their poisonous nature that makes the consumption of them considered a daring delicacy. There's a pretty decent chance that you've heard about fugu, which can either refer to risky traditional Japanese delicacies made from pufferfish, or can refer to several species of pufferfish, or porcupine fish in Japanese, most of which are used to make said Japanese dish. A bit confusing? not as confusing as why eating this would cross someone's mind. Fugu, if not prepared exactly right, is highly poisonous due to a toxin called tratodotoxin, which is 1,200 times deadlier than cyanide. And it's the same toxin that makes blue-ringed octopus and cone snails so deadly. It's so deadly, in fact, that the dish called fugu is heavily regulated in Japan, and you have to train for 3 entire years to be allowed to legally prepare it because it is that deadly if gotten wrong. And only about a third of the chefs who train to do it ever actually become legally qualified. Granted, that is genuinely reassuring, given the lax standards of cooking in a lot of other parts of the world. Freaking beans on toast monsters! To make matters worse, the part of the pufferfish that used to be the most sought after was the liver, and the dish was called fugukimo. But since the liver is literally the most poisonous part of this water-for-brains fish, the Japanese government did the sensible thing and made the liver illegal to prepare in restaurants whatsoever. There were just too many deaths happening everywhere, and this law didn't happen until 1984. Yeah, they were censoring the food! Oh yeah, and another fun fact that I love is that the tetrodotoxin isn't even made by the pufferfish itself, it's created from the bacteria inside of the pufferfish that it gets from eating stuff that contains that bacteria. This last fact is probably why Overqwil's Pokédex entry says that it likes to slurp up poison to nourish itself. It eats poison, the same way pufferfish eat poisonous things that make the poison inside of it. And since the porcupine fish are sometimes used instead of pufferfish to make fugu, Hisuian Qwilfish's dex entry states that it sprays poison from its spines, getting it everywhere. And one of normal Qwilfish's Pokédex entries says that it shoots the poison from the spines on its body in all directions. That could very well be a reference to the common misconception that porcupines shoot out their quills as a self-defense mechanism. They don't. Actually, since we're talking about Pokédex entries, here's one for classic Qwilfish. When faced with a larger opponent, it swallows as much water as it can to match the opponent's size. Which, like, any opponent's size? So why is Hisuian Qwilfish Dark-type now? Well, it's Dark-type because shooting its poisonous load everywhere is gross and mean. But also, it's more interesting than that. It's also because some species of pufferfish are considered extremely aggressive as far as pet fish go, especially the red-eyed puffer. Sounds like a stoner name. But also, it's more interesting than that. And it has to do with its own history. How perfect for a historic region, then, eh? Fugu, the dish, not the fish, has been around in Japan for centuries, though I'm sure the fish has too. Fugu bones have been found in several shell middens called kaizuka from the Yomon period, which dates back to more than 2,300 years ago. Eventually, during the Tokugawa shogunate, too many important people were dying from this dish, and it was just banned outright in the parts of Japan they controlled. But once the shogunate weakened, fish speakeasies started popping up. If you don't know, in the 1920s, the US made alcohol illegal. All this did was make the underworld richer as secret bars, known as speakeasies, popped up all over the major cities, mostly controlled by the mafia. Same thing here, except it was fish. That could kill you. How very, very Japanese. As the shogunate continued to weaken further, however, they just straight up could not enforce it. Nobody took them seriously, so it just sort of became legal again. Daredevil's gonna dare, and I'd like to congratulate Fugu on winning the war on Fugu. Though actually, I guess, either way it loses, because like, the fish dies. But this association with the black market and crime could be exactly why it's Dark-type. After all, Dark-type is also known as the evil or mean-spirited type. And plus, just think Honchkrow. It's just straight up a mafia mob boss. This is also why Dark-type Pokemon are weak to Fighting type, because the Fighting type is also seen as the Justice Hero type. But it gets even better. If you remember, a while ago we did a video talking about when Legends of Arceus seems to be taking place based on the clothing, architecture, technology, politics, and more, and we more or less hit the mark. The Meiji Restoration, the period where Japan sorta forcefully modernized Hokkaido. Conveniently, it was the Meiji era that fugu found itself banned all over again. It's illegal! Dark! Even today, according to some fugu chefs in Tokyo, the Emperor of Japan has never eaten fugu due to an unspecified, centuries-old ban. Of course, though, the peasants, citizens, can risk it for the biscuit all they want. So what's so good about this fish that makes it worth risking your life over? I mean, it's even popular in China and Korea, and one Chinese scholar, statesman, poet conveniently named sushi, which means something different in Chinese, but I just couldn't not bring it up. That's hilarious, given the topic of what we're talking about. He specifically said that the taste of fugu is the worry of death. How poetic. So, like, that's not a real flavor. Is it really just the thrill of potentially ending it all really worth all the hype? That sounds kind of like suicidal ideation. Not actively planning to kill yourself, but not really caring if you die. So just risk it. See a therapist, please, Sushi. Besides, nobody would really want to die by fugu, because do you even know how you die if you got yourself even the tiniest little nibble of poison? It's not pretty. Allow me to explain. As I mentioned earlier, it is their tetrodotoxin that you gotta watch out for. And rather than being made by the fish itself, it is actually produced by a certain infecting or symbiotic bacteria.
Pseudoalteromonas.
Or...
Pseudomonas.
And Vibrio. I can pronounce that one at least. The pufferfish eats all that bacteria and it gets stored in their liver, intestines, and ovaries. And so, to prepare the dish, you need to slice off the flesh of the fish without damaging or getting anywhere close to those organs, as doing so will poison the flesh or the knife. In fact, Japanese law in many prefectures states that restaurants who serve fugu have to have a separate knife and prep station for fugu and only fugu. And oh boy, do you have to clean it like a lot. The last thing you need is cross-contamination, and now the whole restaurant is filled with dead men walking. So, what does tetrodotoxin do? Well, it is what's known as a sodium channel blocker, which means that it inhibits the conduction of sodium ions through voltage-gated sodium channels. It does this by inhibiting the firing of action potentials in neurons and blocking the movement of sodium ions into the neuron. Put in a way this fish could understand, it prevents the nervous system from sending messages via bioelectricity, which means that muscles can't contract. And so, nervous stimuli happens? Body can't understand what anything means. Basically, it makes your body just like... not. Like no more anything. At the cellular level. If we want to get even more specific than that, though, tetrodotoxin binds to what is called Site 1 of the fast voltage-gated sodium channel. The toxin binds to the outside of the ion channel, and when any molecules are bound to Site 1, it temporarily disables the function of that ion channel, which in turn blocks the passage of sodium ions into the nerve cell, which, as I mentioned earlier, makes it to where your body cannot communicate with itself, essentially. There are a few other toxins that do basically the same thing, but tetrodotoxin is the most malicious and potent of them. Dark poison type. Fun fact though, your average fugu fish has enough of this toxin to kill over 30 grown adult humans. And what is it that these fish are like actually trying to protect themselves against? Other fish? Talk about overkill. But now, what does this happening to someone look like? Well, in layman's terms, tetrodotoxin causes the following terrible symptoms: dizziness, exhaustion, headache, nausea, and difficulty breathing. All of these continually worsening until you start going numb. And then the difficulty breathing leads to death by asphyxiation. The bluing of the lips and eyes involved with this may be what the Pokemon's faces are pulling from. But the best part about all of this is that the victim is fully conscious the entire miserable time. Just imagine the panic, just knowing that there's no known antidote, and your best bet at survival is to get put on respiratory and circulatory support until your body metabolizes the toxin, and then poops it out. Hospitals will sometimes also have your stomach pumped, and they would administer activated charcoal to help get rid of some of the remaining poison in the stomach. But there's not really much else they can do. But despite, or maybe because of, all of the above stuff, fugu is a very popular delicacy in Japan. And the most prestigious species used to make fugu is the tiger pufferfish, or as it's known in Japanese, the tora fugu. So why is this one so sought after? Just because it's the most poisonous of all of the species used. Why? Something humans crave, fear, something, there's a reason, terror and terrific have the same root word, something. In fact, fugu is so sought after that the Japanese government had to enact very strict laws about the amount of fugu-able pufferfish to be caught at a time because they're being fished towards depletion. Yeah, they're overfishing the deadly fish because people just love eating it so much. But even with these strict laws, tiger pufferfish are currently considered near endangered and their numbers are dropping, still being caught in amounts that are considered unsustainable for the continuation of this species. So, considering the way humans seem to be acting lately, we won't have to worry about people dying from fugu for much longer, at least. There, I've gone and made myself sad again. Something that may or may not be related to Overqwil is Ibisu, one of the 7 gods of fortune, and the god of fishermen and luck specifically. But because he didn't have arms or legs, or sometimes not having bones, depending on who tells the story, he was thrown into the sea. But he eventually washed to shore in Hokkaido and was cared for by the Ainu, those indigenous to Hokkaido. And as we all know, Hisui and Sinnoh are based on Hokkaido, and they have many things inspired by the Ainu. Some versions of Ibisu's story states that he eventually grew arms and legs again, but is still very slow. But many seafood restaurants, known for their fugu, will incorporate Ibisu into their whole motif and decor. After all, the god of fishermen and luck. You'd better hope you have Ibisu's blessing not to be the unlucky one who gets the death juice. Plus, he was also known for wearing a very tall hat, an inspiration for Overqwil's name and tall spikes, maybe? No. And even to this day, many a fisherman can be seen praying to Ibisu before heading out to fish for the day, because he is said to protect both the ocean and fishermen. Another aspect of pufferfish, and Qwilfish, and Overqwil by extension, that we haven't really talked about yet is the inflation. No, that wasn't funny. This kind of inflation. How do pufferfish do that? Well, the short of it is that they inflate themselves with water as a defense mechanism from being eaten, and they do so by using specialized muscles in their throat and mouth to suck the water that's all around it into its stomach. It takes about 10 to 15 sips for them to inflate to their maximum size, though, but that tends to be about 3 times bigger than their normal size. And it's able to do this because its stomach lining has folds, similar to an accordion. So you could think of it just like an accordion, except it's a fish and it's water. Also, because of the way their spikes are built around the fishies, as they expand, those spikes, as the skin stretches, the spikes all spike out, making it even more of a pain to bite into. So most fish kind of leave them alone. Interestingly, pufferfish don't actually process food in their stomach at all. Rather, it goes into their intestines to be fully digested. That way, there's always room in its stomach for the off chance that it needs to inflate. Specialized organs are really cool, just want to say. Also, I'm glad that the Pokedex is actually reasonable with an early gen Pokemon for once. Here's another one of original Qwilfish's Pokedex entries. To fire its poison spikes, Qwilfish must inflate its body by drinking over 2.6 gallons of water at once. It's definitely a Pokemonified version of how real-world pufferfish work, but still cool. It needs to inflate to shoot out its spikes, just like how real pufferfish need to inflate to raise their spikes. And 2.6 gallons? That's very reasonable. Qwilfish is half a meter and weighs 4 kilograms, and a gallon of water weighs 3.8 kilograms. So it's swallowing 2.6 gallons of water? Yeah, that's about tripling its body size. Remember what I said earlier? It takes about 10 to 15 sips for them to inflate to their maximum size, though. But that tends to be about 3 times bigger than their normal size. Amazing. Wait, so Qwilfish is just a pufferfish then? Sure, it can shoot its spikes, but like... I guess it kinda is like a sea mine. It has like eyes on its tail, and then the new one has like a big Q and a little Q on its tail. For Qwilfish, I now understand why nobody talked about it.
We need a plan. Right now they're probably... Gross! I just sat on something slimy!
Hey, is that the twerp?
It is indeed. Gumi, Sliggoo, and Goodra are cool enough that they gave Ash one in the X and Y anime, and since then, Goodra has become quite the popular Pokemon, especially among certain groups of fans. These mono-dragon type, slime dragons are quite a bit more than meets the eye at first. Look at this. They pull not only from your silly European Puff the Magic Dragon style dragons, but also from the snails in medieval manuscripts, classic JRPG slimes, and even a yokai, especially Hisuian Sliggoo and Goodra. And come to think of it, just how are they different? Why did the Goodra in Old Sinnoh have shells? And depression? Well, let's talk about that. Slimes tend to be the lowest of the low in your classic JRPGs, often the very first sorts of enemies you fight, other than maybe rats. They are weak and pathetic and amorphous. I mean, like, just because they're basic slimes. Sure, there are often stronger slimes in these games later on, but the basic ones? They are just that. Basic. And as a video game trope, we definitely have Dragon Quest to thank for that. The popularity of the cute little slime enemy led to it becoming the series' mascot, and these days it's one of the most recognizable characters in Japan. It's sort of an icon, and one of more than just the Dragon Quest series, but to JRPGs and even RPGs in general. Which, of course, is what eventually led to the creation of Pokemon in the first place. So really then, why did it take 6 generations for Pokemon to get a slime? In the classical sense, anyway. There is Muck and Grimer, but they are living sewage, goopy puddles of gross. They aren't the pudding gelatinous slimes with actually defined shapes like the Dragon Quest slimes, gelatinous cubes, and choo-choos, for instance. Maybe they just didn't want to step on Dragon Quest's toes, or maybe they did think that Muck was enough. Up until Gen 6, when they based their new region, Kalos, on France, famous for its love of snail-eating and being the slimiest country in Europe. But actually, RPG slimes predate video games. Arguably, H.P. Lovecraft's Shaggoth from At the Mountains of Madness is a slime that was written about all the way back in 1931. And there's the classic amoebal alien slime in The Blob from 1958, and plenty more. Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons & Dragons, was heavily influenced by the media of his childhood, and thus the slimes in 1974's Dungeons & Dragons were born. And they've been a staple monster ever since. Even the first edition of the game included a variety of slimes, things like ochre jelly, black pudding, gray ooze, and yellow mold, just to name a few, and they too became an icon of sorts, a staple for turn-based tabletop role-playing games. So, when the genre moved into video games, slimes came along with them. The Flan from Final Fantasy especially seemed to fit D&D's descriptions of them, and some of them have arms sticking out, which is kinda like Gumi having antenna-like horns. Heck, some of them do have antenna. So question now, why are there antennae on the slimes and on the Gumi line? Well, because of the real world's slimiest creatures, of course, slugs and snails. What is a slug if not a real world slime? They are sticky, leave behind trails of slime everywhere they go, are sort of amorphous, and many of them are poisonous. Plus, they dry out, just like Goomy. According to the Pokédex, its body is mostly water. If it dries out, it will die, so it's always sitting with perfect stillness in the shade. The poor things! That's actually the plot of the episode where Ash meets Goomy. They gotta get it wet. This is why you'll most often find slugs and snails under plants and pots and wood and things. It's moist and shaded to keep them from shriveling up and dying. It's also why the biggest land slugs and snails live in areas where the air is almost always moist, like the adorable banana slugs in the Pacific Northwest. But being able to die so easily to something as simple as, the air is 1% too dry, it's pretty pathetic, and they are so soft and easily squishable, and even most land snails have such weak armor that all it does is add a crunch sound effect to their pulverization, nothing more. And their biggest weakness, other than being crushed, is just salt. Salt! A rock so lame we actually eat it, and we use it to make other food just taste better, yet it makes snails burst their insides out! It's ludicrously lamentable. Thus, another of Goomy's Pokédex entries, stating that it is the weakest Dragon-type Pokemon. Ouch. But that brings us to the next question. Why does a slug thing turn into a snail dragon? I mean, Slugoo is even more snail-shaped, and even has this little soft snail shell design on its back. It's like a semi-slug, which is just that, a slug, with a little bit of a transparent snail shell around it. And then it's a full-on dragon. What's up? Well, think back again to those RPGs, Dragon Quest, Dungeons and Dragons. The boss monsters that are their namesake are powerful. Dragons in some mythologies are godly strong, and so in these games they are often late game or even the final bosses. Whereas slimes tend to be some of the first monsters you face. Giant slimes often being early game or even the first bosses. So, in a way, the Goodra line is referencing an entire RPG trope, but it goes deeper, as using snails in place of dragons actually dates back a millennia. Everybody knows the classic story of a valiant knight bravely staring death in the face by facing off against a large dragon. It's a tale that has been told and modified in every conceivable way, millions of times, I'm sure. And even back in the days of chivalrous knights, it was seen as a common story trope in Western European folklore and fairy tales. So, wouldn't it be funny to make them fight like the lowest of the low things instead? Ha! Apparently, manuscript writing monks thought so. So, there are many manuscripts depicting knights fighting snails found all over the place too, all throughout Western Europe. It was almost like a meme for medieval monks. Though, nobody knows for certain why they drew all these, but there are a few theories. My favorite one, though, is that it is, in fact, just a joke. Even several centuries ago, humans were still people. But it does set a scale of creature tiers, doesn't it? The almighty dragon at one end, and a meager slimy little snail on the other. So Goomy to Goodra. You could even call tyrant kings draconic in their reign, while the lowest of people are the slimy conmen, sewer rummaging snails and criminals. But speaking of Goomy, the fact that it has horns and this body shape makes it most similar to Wiwaxia, an extinct genus of soft-bodied marine animals that were covered in a very carbon-esque set of scales and horns. They lived during the early to mid-Cambrian and were extremely tiny, only growing to be like 2 inches in length. And at first, they had these scales, almost like dragon scales, and as they matured, they would start getting all these spiky protrusions, but wouldn't get all of them until adulthood, so Goomy is like an in-between of a baby and adolescent Wiwaxia. But Goomy and Slugoo also seem to pull a bit from nudibranches, which are soft-bodied gastropod mollusks that live in the ocean and are extremely brightly colored and absolutely gorgeous. Many of the nudibranches in the clade Alodida are so bright and colorful to ward off predators because they are poisonous and or venomous, and bright colors are a well-known signal in the animal kingdom. one that means
Stay away from me if you know what's good for you.
They don't synthesize their own toxins, though. Instead, they get it by eating stinging-celled sea creatures like anemones or manowar. The toxin is then stored in their serrata, one of those, which are the tendril-looking things on nudie branches. So, Gumi's Moondex entry saying its source of protection is its slimy, germ-laden mucous membrane could be a reference to the fact that nudie branches get their toxin from eating other stuff. Stuff with germs. It's toxic. They just don't want to say poison or toxic or venom in the dex because it's not poison type. They don't want to confuse people, and that'd just be confusing. And if we want to go specifically into which nudie branch it could be most inspired by, I'd say a good contender is Glaucus atlanticus, otherwise known as the Blue Sea Dragon, or the Dragon Slug. Even though it's not a slug, it's a nudie branch. Well, it probably wasn't used as an inspiration for Gumi's design, but it could well be why Gumi is dragon type, and ends up evolving into a dragon. It's an Aeolid nudie branch, and one of the toxic ones too, so it all just fits. But notably, the word nudie branch comes from the Latin nudus, meaning naked, and the ancient Greek Bepranxia, Bronxia, which means gills. But why are they notable for their nakedness? Most animals are naked. It's because they actually start out with a shell as babies, but then they lose that shell in adulthood, which is interesting because Gumi starts out shellless, and then it gains a shell when it evolves, only to then lose it again. But if it's in Hisui, then it gains a huge shell, and it keeps it. I guess it's to sort of just flip the script on ya. Also, poor Hisuian Goodra looks sad and depressed. I wonder if Gumi's name being so close to the word gloomy was an inspiration to make Hisuian Sliggoo and Goodra so sad and lonely? Because they are! They don't just look it. Hisuian Sliggoo is described as a creature given to melancholy, and Hisuian Goodra loathes solitude and is extremely clingy. It will fume and run riot if those dearest to it ever leave its side, which on one hand is sad, and on the other is sort of adorable. Like a dog with separation anxiety. And this is also probably a play on goo being so sticky, like a dog with separation anxiety. It's like it's emotionally bound to you. But what about Hisui caused them to be sad? Well, maybe it's because back in these Hisuian days, people were scared of Pokemon, and all Goodra wanted was to befriend people. Or perhaps it's so lonely because it's sheltered, and it's lonely and hidden away because it's a homebody. Do you get? In Japan, they refer to eastern dragons, especially the serpentine, arm and legless ones, in a few ways, including their own word, tatsu, or the Chinese long, because it's so narrow and long. That was a joke. Sometimes they will even use the Sanskrit word naga, but when referring to the Western-style dragon, with the 2 or 4 legs and wings and all that, they usually use doragon, which is the Japanese way of pronouncing dragon. And if we look at Goodra's Japanese name, Numergon, we can see that gon affix, which very well could be a reference to how its upright stance and having 4 limbs makes it clearly more Western dragon inspired, and also that it originally comes from a non-Japan inspired region, Kelos, France. Also, speaking of Goodra's name, if we look at the French name for it, we see that it's Muplodocus, which is a combo of mucus and Diplodocus, which is a dinosaur. Now, you would think that it's named after a theropod, the 2-legged, pretty upright ones, because, like, Goodra is sort of a theropod. It's 2-legged and pretty upright. But no, it's named after a 16-ton, very much 4-legged sauropod. Not something you'd think they'd give a dinosaur that's well known for standing upright. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything beyond a weird localization thing, I just thought it was interesting enough to bring up. Just like their eyes. Like, at first I thought Gumi's eyes were the green, like Sliggoo and Goodra's, and that the black dots were its nostrils. But no, the black dots are its eyes, and the green is just decoration, like gross Pikachu cheeks. And actually, according to the Pokedex, Sliggoo's eyes dissolved, so it can't see anything, which might have something to do with them being just green voids now. Thankfully, they grow back as a Goodra, and that's perhaps a reference to Slug's insane regrowth abilities. One group of Japanese scientists not too long ago learned that some sea slugs can get fully decapitated and just regrow their whole body, no problem. Curiously now though, none of these Pokemon have eyes on the ends of long stalks like real snails and slugs, which is probably just to make sure they don't look dumb. But I do like that they still included these snail stalks just as antennae or horns. And actually, according to the Pokédex, Goodra's horns are retractable, the same way that real snails' eye stalks are retractable. It's a really fun design aspect of them. As is taking a French mythical creature into consideration. This is Lucarcole, a giant, viscous, slimy snail serpent with a big upright shell on its back. Honestly, it's just a more hardcore Sliggoo, for real. But now, what's with Hisuian Sliggoo? Why is its shell so much bigger now? And why is it sideways? And in Japan now? Well, because Hisuian Sliggoo, and to some extent Hisuian Goodra, is probably heavily inspired by a yokai, the Shusebora, meaning ascended or promoted trumpet shell, which is a turban or trumpet-shelled snail that lives 1,000 years in the mountains, 1,000 on the plains, and 1,000 at sea. And having now lived 3,000 years, it will ascend and turn into a dragon. It's called an ascended trumpet snail because of the Japanese concept of shuseiwo, which is an idea that some fish are called different things at different stages in their life. Kind of like how bugs are known as pupa or larva or what have you, depending on the stage they are in. But with shuseiwo, since fish don't really have that obvious metamorphosis beyond egg to fry to adult, how can that be? Well, it's more like they're called different things based on their size, and sometimes on what region of Japan they were fished from. One example is the amberjack. Depending on its size and the region, the fish has a number of different names. When it is under 15 centimeters, it is called wakashi. When it is over 15 centimeters, but under 40 centimeters, it is an inada. Around 60 centimeters, it becomes a warasa, and around 90 centimeters, it becomes a buri. Shuseiwo is also applied to other fish such as koi, tuna, and the sea bass, which in one stage of Shuseiwo is known as bora, which is probably where a part of the name Shusebora comes from. Especially when we consider that bora could also come from hora, short for horagi, which means giant triton, which is the snail that the Shusebora starts life out as. Remember, a lot of yokai start life as a normal animal or a normal everyday object, and then they get turned into a yokai as they get really, really old and or become possessed with supernatural energy. That makes sense. Now though, let's get into the actual yokai itself. Long ago, the ancient Japanese believed that giant triton snails were born high up in the mountains. And remember, Hisui, Sinnoh, Hokkaido, they're very mountainous regions. These snails live there, doing snail things for 1,000 or sometimes 3,000, depending on the source, years, and then turn into a yokai that goes and lives near the villages of the people. Then, after another 1,000 or so years, they burrow underground, and then burrow their way out to sea, where they live their life as a dragon in a shell. And of course, they get bigger as they're living those initial 1,000 years in the mountains. That way, they'll be proper dragon size by the time they reach the ocean. And as mentioned, bora can also be hora, and hora is also a name for the kinds of caves left in mountains after mudslides. The people who explored those mountains looked at these caves and thought, a giant creature must have lived here, but where did it go? And then extrapolate from there. There are even stories in newspapers about this as recent as the Meiji period, aka the time period that Legends Arceus is most inspired by. But this leads us to the elephant question in the elephant room. Why snails in mountains? Well, since Japan used to be underneath the ocean in the ancient past, and earthquakes and mudslides are a common thing in Japan, you can find fossils and shells of snails all over the place in the mountains. So, most likely, people collected enough of these shells all the way up there that they just assumed that snails definitely lived up there, in the caves. The same exact caves that they thought some sort of big yokai came from. And the reason why they're named after the triton or trumpet snail is undoubtedly because most species of triton snail are huge. Just gargantuan. They're not that big, but they're very big for snails. Coronia tritonus is the biggest of them, and it can have a shell up to 20 inches. So again, not far-fetched to believe that the ancient Japanese saw an empty shell of one and thought it was big enough to be deserving of being the home of a dragon of some sort. Most often, Shusebora is typically depicted as a dragon popping up out of a shell that is facing upwards as opposed to the hole facing down forward like most snails, which is probably why Hisuian Sliggoo is popping up out of a sideways-looking shell instead of the normal snail shell. Notably, there is also a Digimon based on this too, and even it has the shell sideways. But then, it's a regular old snail shell again. Notably, the Pokédex says it's able to freely control the hardness of its metallic shell. And it is steel type. This new shell and ability may be inspired by the scaly-foot gastropod then, a sea snail that has a lot of iron in its shell, the amount of which varies with time based on its recent diet, almost as if it were controlling its hardness in an oversimplified way. Plus those huge scales and the fact that it grows its own iron suit of armor and thrives in white-hot hydrothermal vents sounds pretty draconic to me. As for the very defined upright shell, that probably has to do with the Sapporo Maimai snail, a snail native to Hokkaido that has an incredibly well-defined snail shell. Look at how perfectly swirly that is. The swirl just pops right out at you. And interestingly, while most of the time their shells are upright the way you typically imagine a snail, they do sometimes be on the side, hence Hisuian Sliggoo going from sideways to upright with a very defined swirl, and also hence their signature move, Shelter, where they just go into their shells for a defensive buff, just like the Sapporo Maimai snail. And all snails, really. So all in all, the Goodra line has every reason to be both in Hisui and Kalos. Snails and dragons and the mythology involved pulls from both real-world locations, and OG Goodra is more of a slug slime, while Hisuian Goodra is more snail. Possibly also being a reference to slugs being found all across Europe, hence the European Goodra being so sluggy, whereas most slugs in Hokkaido are invasive species, though there are plenty of snails, hence Hisuian Goodra being more of a snail. But now, for an even more important animal. Within Ainu tradition, there is a belief in entities called kamui. While it cannot be compared directly to common Western spiritual beliefs, I'll try my best to sort of explain it in a simple way. They are very similar to how kami are viewed in Japanese Shinto practice. General spirits. They can be anything from the beings who created the universe to local spirits that live within all animals, plants, and the environment. Some describe it as a form of animism vaguely similar to a number of Native American beliefs. The Shinto concept of kami and the Ainu kamui are often compared, but overall the traditions are still very distinct. Anyway, to sort of get what I mean, let's look at Hisuian Braviary. First off, regular Braviary was always a bald eagle, which has many eagle relatives, and this is perfect. Hokkaido is home to the Stellar's sea eagle, also known as the Owashi. And get a load of that beak! This is certainly the inspiration here, as they share the same habitat and color palette, and the white head of the Braviary we know already carries over. Though this is fun, Unovan Braviary's head resembles some Native American war bonnets, whereas Hisuian Braviary's head resembles a haguma. This is Imperial Japanese Army officer headwear, particularly during the Boshin War, which happens to be around the same time period that this very game seems to take place. Plus, very fitting to keep its head war-themed. But also, the Pokemon website mentions that it flies here from further up north, which implies Russia, and its head also resembles their traditional cross-sack hats, which were also used as army officer hats. Or perhaps Pokemon is implying the area where there was once a land bridge which early humans used to travel from Asia to North America. After all, bald eagles freaking love Alaska, and this would further link up this Braviary to the more American-inspired Braviary. Now, some kamui are more revered than others and are given the honor of having the women wear secret girdles dedicated to them. They were used to indicate lines of matrilineal descent. The author of Ainu, Creed and Cult notes 8 different girdles, one of which is dedicated to the sea eagle kamui, known as Kapachia kamui. Now, as for the psychic typing, it could be combining the idea of psychic third eyes with the eye spots of feathers. Many birds have these to both ward off predators and attract mates. But it could simply be due to its connections with spiritual energy and such. Or it could be pulling from a major Kamui who was also a bird, though an owl, a Blankiston's fish owl, or Shima Fukuro. Being a fish owl does connect it somewhat more with a sea eagle. It's known as Chikap Kamui, or Kotankor Kamui. It watches over the land and makes sure rituals are performed correctly. And owls are often seen as wise, so psychic. That's incredibly loose though, but it is also considered one of the rarest birds in the world, possibly explaining why we are only seeing this form of Braviary now. In the past, they've gone basically extinct by the time of the more modern games. There's also the screech owl, and a Kamui associated with that is the Yukchikap Kamui, i.e. the divine deer bird, which is said to always know the exact spot where deer are found for hunting, almost like a sixth sense. So perhaps this Braviary is pulling from various bird-related Kamui, or perhaps not. But what is super cool is that Kamui like this are often the ones prayed to for guidance and assistance. And considering that you can fly around with the help of this one and ride around on Weirdeer, that may be a part of the inspiration. Like the ride Pokemon in Sun and Moon, you call upon them for help. And speaking of Weirdeer, let's do that next. It's a new evolution of Stantler, who also gains the psychic typing. Notably now though, Stantler pretty much was already psychic type. It learns loads of psychic type moves, and it's already able to create a strange space where reality is distorted thanks to its antlers. Distorting space, how thematic of Sinnoh. Staring at its antlers creates an odd sensation as if one were being drawn into their centers. Those who stare at its antlers will gradually lose control of their senses and be unable to stand. These are all from Pokédex entries. It's based primarily on a Sika deer, though there are also reindeer and moose elements. But a Sika deer is definitely the most similar, what with the spots and the antlers and the being in Japan thing, and it mixes that with the deer in the headlights motif, and sort of the general themes of the Shishi Odoshi, literally deer scare. It is a Japanese device used to scare deer and birds away from gardens. Its name in Japanese is Odoshishi after all. It's a very clever pun that encapsulates all of this, but it only works in Japanese, so we just got the name Stantler. Anyway, now it's a Weirdeer. Notably, Psychic type can be explained as weird. Psychic terrain describes itself as things got weird in-game after all, but also that particular spelling of weird is Anglo-Saxon and can roughly be translated as fate or personal destiny. Things a future-seeing Psychic type would be able to see. It also vaguely sounds like ward, like how Shishiadoshi ward off deer. The Pokemon website mentions that it uses its antlers like antennae, which would explain their new look, resembling various radio, TV, and satellite antenna. Now, how about that Santa beard? Plop a Delibird on it and bam! You got some Christmas merch for next year! Notably, Sika deer used to live from Vietnam all the way to Russia, where reindeer also live, but they've since become almost extinct outside of Japan. This might also explain why we haven't seen this evolution of Stantler before. They've become fully extinct by the time of the more modern games, global warming likely being a contributing factor. So what of the connection to Hokkaido then? Well, there's the Yezo Sika deer, also known as Yuk in the Ainu language. It is the largest of all Sika deer and sports the largest antlers out of all of them too, and it's found only on Hokkaido. So it's a fitting evolution, and it's also a very important source of food and clothing for the Ainu, similar to this Pokemon with the clothing. And as such, the Ainu show them great respect. The Ainu saw them and their respective Kamui as equals, and always gave thanks. I mean, these deer are one of the sole food sources some of the villages have over winter. That's some mighty importance. So of course, there should be a Pokemon for it. Looking elsewhere, in the Shinto religion, deer, white ones especially, are considered the messengers of the gods, and are often rode around on by them. And if we look to the west, considering the weird part of its name, and considering that we were just in Galar, which is based on England, there is the White Hart of legend, with its golden antlers. It became King Richard II's badge, and is to this day the 5th most popular thing to name a pub after. So there's that. Now then, Basculegion. I love this thing! I've never loved a fish Pokemon this much before! It's so much cooler than Gyarados! Get out of here! Here's its official description. Basculin in the Hisui region can evolve into this Pokemon. This evolution occurs when a Basculin is possessed by the souls of other Basculin from its school that could not withstand the harsh journey upstream. Basculegion fights together with these souls, which attack opponents as if with a will of their own. So the first thing I think of with that description is, of course, salmon. And sure enough, salmon do exactly that in Hokkaido. In fact, Hokkaido is home to the Hokkaido Island Chum Salmon Fishery, which is the biggest volume chum fishery in the world. So of course, a salmon Pokemon in this region? Yes, please. Its long body shape also made me think about an Italmacheep. That is after I looked up what that is. It's the type of boat that the Ainu most commonly used. And sure enough, the oars that would be used with them are shaped like Basculegion's pectoral fins. It's the same thing we did with our Pacific Northwest salmon Fakemon, Sanook. It's the Chinookan salmon. It's just such a good idea. Like the deer, salmon were incredibly important to the Ainu. And the Kamui of all fish, the divine fish, is a salmon that they would offer sake to. How masculine. Size can also be masculine, and wouldn't you know it, while most salmon I interact with get to be a little over a meter, the Japanese Huchin, or Sakhalin Taimen in Hokkaido, are huge for salmon. 20 pounds and over 2 meters! And it's got those pink ends, just like the massive Basculegion. How perfect! How have I not heard of these fish? Oh, because they too are near extinct. They have only 5% of the population that they should have, and this going extinct thing only really happened in the last 150 years or so thanks to logging, oil, and poaching. Again, sort of explaining why we haven't seen this evolution before, but now that we're in a game that's set in the past, yeah, it's here now. How sad. Anyway, the Legion in its name is referring to the group of souls that it carries with it. The souls of its fallen comrades who didn't survive the journey back upstream, which is a sad fate many salmon fall victim to. This is really cool though. It falls in line with the way the Ainu saw spiritual energy. Kamui can be anything from the beings who created the universe to the tools that people use so much that they absorb the energy of the person who used them, to the energy you get from eating food, especially animals. This energy is always being traded around. It flows, especially to where it's needed, in this case upstream, as a Basculegion, who is only able to make it thanks to the added energy. It also falls in line with the idea of ancestor worship, a practice common across many cultures, but East Asia especially. Many believe that their ancestors follow their families to act as guardians to help guide and protect their offspring. Essentially, there are legions of spirits following you around. Now, other than salmon, I of course want to talk about bass too. After all, Basculin and Basculegion, it's still got bass in the name, and the first one is clearly a bass. And so here's a fun thing. It's Ebisu, the Japanese god of fishing and fortune. Most commonly, he's portrayed holding either a red sea bream or a sea bass, and many theorize that he may have in fact been Ainu, as he is especially hairy, a trait that Ainu have been historically described as having due to their comparative hairiness when compared to other Japanese people. Plus, in his origin story, he was essentially raised by them. He was stranded in the ocean as a baby and was saved by the Ainu people, who cared for him until he grew into the god of fishing. And really, it's not all that uncommon for neighboring peoples and neighboring mythologies to cross over and influence each other like that. On top of this, the name Ebisu is sort of interchangeable with Emishi and Ezo. When breaking down the meaning of the two kanji used to write the word, it can be translated as shrimp barbarians, which is notable as this was a term used by the Japanese for many centuries to refer to the northern peoples outside of the influence of the Japanese Empire, such as the Ainu. And another thing, throwing all of this sort of together, Basculegion's long body also resembles the koinobori, or carp wind socks, that are used all over Japan. One particular day especially, Children's Day, a holiday celebrating children and their parents, the continuation of families for ancestors to watch over, essentially. And actually, it wasn't until the 1940s that it became known as Children's Day. Before that, it was Boys' Day, celebrating boys and recognizing fathers. How masculine. Like basculin. This holiday also happens to be on the same day as their Dragon Boat Festival, which was adopted from China, whose celebration relates to the carp jumping over the Dragon Gate to become a dragon, you know, Magikarp's whole thing. So yeah, Basculegion is Basculin's Gyarados, is it not? Plus, this festival features dragon boat races where whole legions of men row the long and narrow boats in honor of fish who avoid obstacles and swim upstream. And I mean, look at that thing! That screams supernatural aquatic thing, right? But back to the Ainu and another similar fish. Interestingly, the Iwana, or white-spotted char, which also lives throughout and around Hokkaido, does the same thing. I mean, it is, after all, in the salmon family, and Basculegion's longer, narrower body, as well as its plethora of spots, definitely seem to pull from this fish, especially since this fish was incredibly important to the Ainu, whose word for this is amemasu. One Ainu tale speaks of a giant lake-dwelling amemasu who blocked the water from flowing to the ocean. It sat here for thousands of years, and eventually, a beautiful sika deer walked by, and the fish swallowed it whole. The deer, not appreciating this action, broke out of its gut, killing the fish in the process, and a bird who witnessed this flew off to warn the people about it. The big fish's corpse then flowed to the ocean, and its spirit is now responsible for tsunamis. So, a giant ghost fish that resides in both fresh and salt water. Basculegion is 3 meters long. That's huge! So, maybe that tale is a source of inspiration as well. And honestly, that story is just missing a dog. Then it would have all of the elements of all 4 of these new Pokemon. Speaking of the 4 Pokemon, last Pokemon time, it's Hisuian Growlithe. It's pretty simple, honestly. The Arcanine line is already based on Shisha, Shishi, Fudogs, Fulions, Koma Inu. They go by many names, often interchangeably these days. But to be more correct, the statue without a horn is called Shishi, and the other is Komainu.
But most of the time, neither have horns. What's up with that?
And the answer is just history. The statues that were created after the Showa era simply do not have a horn. Why? Well, as far as my research shows, during the Meiji period, again, roughly when this game takes place, shortly after Japan's war with Russia, the production of these statues grew to commemorate their victory. This sparked a boom in popularity that continued to grow and peaked in 1940. And this was the era where things were beginning to become standardized or more mass-produced. And a big part of that is refining the design of things. The statue makers noted that the horns were always the first part to break, and they were tired of having to go fix them all the time. So sure enough, they just stopped giving them horns. Mass media also grew during this time, so putting a horn on one of them sort of just fell out of fashion. And so, that of course means that if we are basing a Pokemon game before that happened, then yeah, of course it would have a horn, simple as. Plus, Growlithe's official description states, the sharp horn on its head is made of rock, but it breaks easily. It's just too good. And it's not like that idea is uncommon. Here's Tama from Sakuna of Rice and Ruin, and his horn is broken too. So really, Hisuian Growlithe's design pulls from the same thing that Arcanine and Growlithe already pulled from, but now it's much more literal, especially with its rock typing and style of fur more closely resembling older styles of the statues. And the bib-looking part of the mane is no accident. Some temples practice putting fresh bibs on the statues as a Shinto rite, though nobody knows for certain when or why that started. And it's more commonly done at Inari shrines on a fox statue, but either way, it's been done for centuries, so the tradition stands. And of course, Komainu always come in pairs, hence their official description stating that they tend to be seen watching over their territory in pairs. And now, how about Hisuian Arcanine? Well, Same story. It's based on the same thing, just even older depictions of it, and using much darker stone. Though one additional detail I really enjoy is that its tail and back leg fur are shaped to resemble smoke blowing off of it. It's still a hot dog after all. Otherwise, its darker color could pull from the Kai-Ken, a Japanese dog breed with orange and dark brown stripes. Oh, what a good dog! Oh, I just want to pet it! Ooh. Now then, about the Hisuian starter Pokemon. And the first big obvious thing is that they are clearly more Japanese. Which makes sense. I mean, Sinnoh is based on Hokkaido, or in this case, Hisui is based on Ezo, which is what Hokkaido used to be named before they changed it to Hokkaido. Hence, Hisui really being the same as Sinnoh, but before they named it Sinnoh. Yeah. This game pulls much of its inspiration from the Meiji Restoration time period, basically when Japan was westernizing, modernizing, and settling into being open again after being isolated for several centuries. This is also the time period when they started colonizing Hokkaido, to oversimplify it a bit. It's also a part of why they changed the name at this time. And a lot of this restoration stuff started because of the Americans and the British sort of force opening Japan.
Open the country. Stop having it be closed.
Which is likely the main reason why Professor Laventon is Galarian, and why these starter options are what they are. Oshawott and Rowlet are from Unova and Alola, both of which are based on modern-day United States. And then Cyndaquil is from Johto, which is based primarily on the Kansai region of Japan, a very traditional region, so perhaps connected to those who sent explorers into Ezo in the first place. But in the case of the Pokemon version of reality, these foreign starter Pokemon are brought into this new, unexplored region, and the energy here, be it naturally from the region itself or due to all of the Arceus shenanigans going on, causes their final evolutions to be different from what they would normally become in their home regions, with different secondary types to boot. But why? Well, let's start with the cool one. Oh, who is it? Who's it gonna be? Who am I gonna say? It's Decidueye. I mean, it's an owl archer because owls have some of the best eyes. But why is it fighting type now instead of ghost? And egad, why was it ghost type to begin with? We had to do a whole video explaining that typing here, but as for its new fighting type, that has to do with its new origins. First, the animal. Owl. Got it. But the Pueo and stilt owls in particular, as they walk around on long legs and are Hawaiian, so Alolan. But Hisuian Decidueye seems to more closely resemble various burrowing owls, which could be reflected by Decidueye's shorter wings now too. In fact, these shorter wings are sort of referred to in its Pokedex entry. The air stored inside the rachises of Decidueye's feathers insulates the Pokemon against Hisui's extreme cold. Alright, well not its wings exactly, but rather the way it holds its wings. It's keeping its core warm by wrapping its wings around itself, because Hisui is stinking cold compared to Alola. And by doing this with its wings, they start to resemble a mino, or a traditional straw cape for protection from the rain. In fact, these were often worn along with Sandagasa, the classic straw travel hat. In fact, showing a character wearing both of these, along with the sandals and just this whole getup while carrying a sword, is extremely common shorthand for this dude is a Ronin, a vagrant samurai with no lord or master, often because they disobeyed Bushido code. Normally, you're supposed to commit seppuku if your lord dies in battle, but those who don't become Ronin, wandering the countryside. Notably, Hisuian Decidueye's official description states it doesn't have a set territory. Instead, it goes wandering in search of food to survive. That's some peak Ronin behavior. At this point, most Ronin would become mercenaries or bodyguards, but being human, these Ronin would not all be good guys. Many would turn to highway robbery, operate gangs and illegal gambling shops and brothels, and even shaking down local businesses for protection money. Dark type Yakuza style. But what's most common for media depictions of protagonist Ronins is that they are the more honorable ones. They are the heroes of the story usually, fighting for honor and justice. So, fighting type, using well-trained, disciplined fighting techniques is what separates the normal type from the fighting type after all. One true story that inspired this trope is the tale of the 47 Ronin, where 47 samurai lost their master to an unjust Holocaust's death. And rather than commit seppuku, they all vowed to avenge his death to reattain his honor. And then commit Sudoku. Such loyalty, being so beholden to a code. That takes discipline. That's some fighting type stuff right there. Also, most media depictions of Honorable Ronin usually have them as the edgy loner kind of character, which is very fitting of these solitary owls. It should also be noted that while the starter Pokemon in Legends Arceus are specifically said to be foreign, local tales could still play a role in why they were chosen over the other starters. By which I mean the myths and legends of Ezo or Hokkaido's native people. The Ainu could be playing a part too. In the case of the Rowlet line, it could be because of Kikapkamui, the Ainu god of owls and the land. Owls, being birds, are usually associated with trees and the sky, but this god, being the god of owls and the land, works perfectly since Hisuian Decidueye is mostly a burrowing owl, which burrow in the land. Fun. And I love that. But now, if you've watched our other videos covering all the Hisuian Pokemon, which you totally should, you'll remember that I have mentioned Koei's Samurai Warriors and Nobunaga's Ambition video game series a number of times. Quick reminder, they are historic fiction games. Most of the characters and events of these games are based on real people and real historic events, though the specifics are fantastical and significantly modernized. Also, it's important to note that Pokemon has in the past worked with Koei. Pokemon Conquest is literally a Pokemon and Nobunaga's Ambition crossover game. Literally. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that if a Pokemon were to have its design be partially inspired by a real historic person, that they would take Koei's interpretation of that person into consideration. I mean, Kleavor, Sneasler, Samurott now? Yeah, we're talking about Samurott now. Really, the least amount of change for these Hisuian variants. I mean, it's just kind of a Shadow the Hedgehog to Samurott's Sonic. You know, they're the same colors even. Faker. But Samurott really was already perfect for the Hisui region. I mean, it's got samurai in the name. It's got a samurai helmet motif going on, even the samurai armor and the sword, and it's an otter sea lion thing. They are both inherently samurai. I mean, look at them. The samurai do that move where they sheath their sword and then whoopah, single slash. And similarly, otters have a secret pocket under their arms where they store their favorite sharp rocks for cracking open clams and such. Same hat. Its Pokédex entries talk about it defeating its enemies in a single quick swing. One swing of the sword incorporated in its armor can fell an opponent. In the time it takes a foe to blink, it can draw and sheathe the scimitars attached to its front legs. Also, scimitars? Oh my god, the pun. A scimitar is a type of sword, but Samurott uses water magic and the sword is actually seashell, so it's a scimitar. Too good. But that whole single strike thing, it's an entire anime meme at this point. The unsheathing of the sword so fast you can't see it, or charging past an enemy and you each hit each other but the bad guy goes down. But now though, Hisuian Samurott, it's water dark type now. It is the bad guy. We have a video here going in depth about what the dark type really means, but in short, it's mean-spirited, it's evil, it's trickstery, cheating, angry, etc. And I'll just say etc. because I can't think of anything else. For Hisuian Samurott specifically though, the Pokédex reads, hard of heart and deft of blade. This rare form of Samurott is a product of the Pokemon's evolution in the region of Hisui. Its turbulent blows crash into foes like ceaseless pounding waves. And that first line makes the dark type connection easy, and its blows constantly slicing into its enemies ceaselessly just adds to that. Rather than quickly putting you down with a single merciful slash, it enjoys the many slashes, seeing you wince in pain with each one. Or perhaps it's simply furious, attacking your corpse again and again with rage. And then there's the way it looks down upon you. It has the dark, blood-colored shells. Yeah, so I'm totally thinking this dude's inspired by Nobunaga himself. I mean, the other Pokemon that are potentially based on historic Japanese figureheads are inspired by Nobunaga's top general, Nobunaga's wife, Nobunaga's sister. It makes sense for one of them to be Nobunaga. Oda Nobunaga was a mighty warlord and is regarded as the first great unifier of Japan. But don't let such a title make you think he was some heroic good guy. Driven by a need for power and spite, he earned the nickname Demon King due to his ruthless military tactics, violent outbursts, and brutal suppression of those who refused to cooperate with him. And he hated Buddhists for attempting to stay peaceful and neutral, as well as the idea that many would follow the teachings of Buddha rather than him. So he burned many Buddhist temples to the ground. Like, there's a reason he's the main antagonist in Pokemon Conquest, and most media that he's in. He was a bad dude, and not the cool kind of bad dude, like actually bad and actually a dude, but a bisexual icon nonetheless. So if he were a Pokemon, he would for sure be sexy, and also a dark-type samurai of sorts. And here we are. Purple, black, and red armor even, with jaggedy points and a torn cape resembling Samurott's mustache. Yeah, and typically shown head up or looking down upon you because he finds himself so mightily important. And in many depictions, including samurai warriors, Nobunaga is said to have a demonic sword. The demonic power inside makes it a bloodthirsty, evil blade that does not discriminate about who it cuts. It may just as well be cutting down butterflies as severing heads, so long as it's killing. This sword creates a bloodlust in whomever wields it, hence why Nobunaga was the way that he was. Honestly, this is kind of fitting as a representation to how many Ezo natives saw the Japanese. I mean, in the year 660, Japan just came in, massacred most of the people there, and then proceeded to not really get involved again for another 700 years. And when they did, yeah, they were forcefully settling in, swords ablazing in conquest. I would also think samurai are all evil if my only interaction with them was them killing, mercilessly, everyone that I knew. But there's more to this Pokemon than that even. After all, the only part of Japan where sea otters live natively is Hokkaido, and as such, of course, the Ainu revered them. In fact, there's the Kutune Shirka, which is considered to be the most important piece of Ainu literature. It tells the story of a man tracking down a magical golden otter who glinted like a sword. And he does this in order to receive many treasures, one of which is a magical sword with many animals engraved on its sheath. Having read this epic now, by my understanding, this sword grants the wielder the knowledge and skill of a great warrior without the need for training, and the animal engravings can summon the spirits of those animals to fight for you as well, almost like a Pokemon. And with this sword, he is able to easily strike down all those who come after the golden otter after he catches it and brings it to his village. Of which there are many, because everybody wants it. So yes, magical otter, magical sword, most important piece of Ainu literature, it's all too perfect. So now, let's move on to the last one. Typhlosion. Ew, look what they did to my precious shrew! I thought badgers were supposed to be cool. Typhlosion is a badger thing, and now a spirit medium of sorts. In most cultures, mediums, witches, spirit channelers, and the like are women. So here, Typhlosion gets some feminine spooky makeup and hair patterns. According to its official description, Hisuian Typhlosion has a very relaxed disposition and can often be seen staring into space. At such times, it is thought to be looking at the flow of life energy and spirits, which is similar to the actions and personalities of many various spiritualists, especially in media. And the connection between fire and ghost is easy enough thanks to will-o'-the-wisps and such, phantom flames of ghostly energy. That's what Spiritomb is, after all, and that's not the only connection they share. Spiritomb is said to be 108 spirits trapped in an odd keystone, a reference to the 108 stars of destiny in Water Majin, a classical Chinese novel. Back to Hisuian Typhlosion's official description, it emits ghost flames, said to number as many as 108 from the fires around its neck. So it also has 108 spirits or ghosts around it. Curious! 108 is actually a very important symbolic number in certain practices of Buddhism. There are 108 beads on the prayer bead necklaces. One ceremony involves ringing a bell 108 times at the end of the year to welcome in the new one. There are 108 earthly temptations one must overcome to achieve nirvana. The Lankavatara Sutra has a section where the Bodhisattva Mahamati asks Buddha 108 questions. It's a very important number in Buddhism, hence this Typhlosion being ghost type now. Nobunaga Samurott got to it already.
And Decidueye is
here to avenge it! In its ghostly flame attack, you can even see faces on its little spirits. Jaggedy mouths, just like Spiritomb even. So these are for sure separate spirits. But while Spiritomb is 108 spirits trapped, the 108 spirits with Typhlosion are on their way to where they belong. Hence this Pokédex entry, said to purify lost, forsaken souls with its flames and guide them to the afterlife. And its description, it will occasionally eat wayward spirits, but it's believed that spirits consumed this way are then purified by the Pokemon's flames and returned to where they belong. Notably, the Ainu goddess Kamui Huki, or Husi, I apologize, is considered one of the most important Kamui. She is the spirit of fire, and her flames are a gateway between the two realms, ours and the spirit realm, sending them onward to the heavens through the smoke. And on top of her association with fire, she is the Kamui of hearth and home. She never leaves her home, and her fire, like yours, should never go out. On its own, this has nothing to do with badgers, though. The Japanese badger is found all over Japan except Hokkaido. Weird. Though there is one traditional connection between Buddhism and badgers, the tale of the badger's money, but it also has nothing to do with guiding spirits and is instead just about being grateful, even if you're a badger. Or perhaps going back to the fire Kamui who never leaves her home, badgers are often depicted in media as being homebodies, spending most of their time in their warm burrows, just being with themselves or their family, only ever coming out when they need to. So the connection could be as simple as that. Oh, well, here's an idea. So these starter Pokemon were brought here by Professor Laventon, who's insinuated to be from Galar, yes? Well, Celtic amulets said to protect against witchcraft and evil spirits used badger hair. That doesn't super help, but I found it interesting enough to say. I guess Typhlosion just doesn't have as much to talk about, but that's okay. I mean, Pidove is a pigeon with a heart-shaped chest because it's a friend. And we love it, right? Right? Well, all in all, I believe when it comes down to what inspired these Hisuian forms, what real-world animals and culture and history they referenced, what media tropes they pulled in, and what belief systems they referenced, they overall did a pretty good job. I have seen some argue that certain elements of this game and its Pokemon designs may be a bit disrespectful, though I am in no position to comment on that specifically as I am no expert, but I doubt any blatant disrespect was intended. And gosh, I sure hope this isn't a Speedy Gonzalez situation. Well, now you know a lot more than you did before. Hopefully, anyway. And most of it is tangentially related to Pokemon. That's my goal, anyway. Thanks for watching. Never stop using your noggin, and a huge, huge, huge thanks to our YouTube members and our Patreon patrons. Your support directly feeds my cat and the editors, too. Very good.